As the sun dips behind the jagged horizon, the rules of the battlefield don't just change, they invert. The vibrant silk colors of your armor fade into a uniform charcoal, and the clear lines of sight you relied on all day are swallowed by a creeping, violet haze. This is the realm of night raids and silent screams, a psychological torture chamber where the loudest sound is the one you can't quite locate. You are part of a small detachment moving through the pitch-black woods bordering the enemy camp. In the daylight, your screaming was a banner of pride. Tonight, it is a surgical strike. You don't just shout to the wind anymore. You wait until the camp is quiet, until the only sounds are the crackle of dying fires and the distant whinny of a restless horse. And then you whisper a name into the darkness. Or better yet, you bellow it once, a single, earth-shaking declaration, and then you vanish back into the shadows. Historians still argue whether the night attack was considered truly honorable, or if it was a desperate tactic used primarily by those with inferior numbers. Regardless of the ethics, you know the effect it has on the human mind. Sleep deprivation is the ultimate debuff. When an enemy knows there is a master archer out there who knows their name, sleep becomes an impossibility. Every rustle of a leaf is a notched arrow. Every hoot of an owl is a signal. You are using your voice to haunt the camp. By calling out specific names, you are telling the enemy that your intelligence is perfect, that there is nowhere to hide, even in the dark. It is the 12th century equivalent of a psychological operation, turning the woods into a living, breathing monster that speaks with your voice. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit about these night tactics. Some archers would attach fireflies or small glowing mosses to their arrow shafts, not for light, but to create eerie, drifting streaks in the air that looked like vengeful spirits. Imagine being a weary sentry and hearing your name called from the blackness, followed by a faint, glowing trail of light whizzing past your ear. It's enough to make the most hardened veteran drop his spear and run for the nearest shrine. You find a dark amusement in this theatrical cruelty. You aren't just trying to kill them, you're trying to make them believe they are already being hunted by the supernatural. You feel the cold dampness of the night air in your lungs. It makes your voice sound deeper, more gravelly. When you let out a kiai now, you aren't aiming for the resonant bell quality of the noonday duel. You're aiming for the growl of the tiger. You want the sound to feel like it's coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. You've learned to use the echoes of the valley to your advantage, shouting in one direction and moving in another before the sound even finishes, bouncing off the rocks. You are a ghost with the DQ. The psychological pressure of the unseen is a force multiplier that turns your 20 arrows into a perceived army of hundreds. You remember the crocodile dung logic, the commitment to an extreme advantage. In the dark, your edge is your ears. You have trained to see with your hearing, identifying the metal clink of a helmet or the soft thud of a boot on pine needles. When you finally speak, it is with the authority of someone who has already won. You call out a challenge to the enemy commander, mocking his inability to protect his own men in the dark. You are stripping away his dignity in front of his troops. A leader who is mocked in the middle of the night, while he sits shivering in his tent, is a leader who will find his orders questioned when the sun finally rises. Interestingly, some legends speak of silent screams, a technique where you exhale with the full force of a kiai, but keep the sound purely internal. The idea is that the ki, the energy, still hits the opponent even without the acoustic noise. While you aren't sure if you've mastered the invisible strike, you've certainly seen the effect of a well-timed, silent presence. Sometimes, just the absence of the scream you've been providing all day is enough to break a man's spirit. The silence becomes a void that the enemy fills with their own worst fears. You are the architect of that void, but you have to be careful. The night is a double blend. If you scream too much, you provide a perfect tracer for a return volley. You have to be a master of the one-shot, one-scream rule. You notch an arrow, a specialized night shaft with a blackened tip to prevent any glint of moonlight, and wait. You feel the rhythm of the enemy camp. You find the sentry who is nodding off. You let out a short, sharp bark of a name, and before the echo has died, the arrow is in his chest. The silence that follows is your true masterpiece. It is the silence of a camp that knows death is nearby but cannot see its face. You look at your bow, the dark lacquer making it invisible against your robes. You are a shadow among shadows. You realize that the fashion of fear has shifted from the flamboyant to the non-existent. You are no longer a peacock, you are a panther. Your intimidation is based on the fact that you are a whisper that kills. You take a slow, shallow breath, keeping your lungs warm and ready for the next vocal strike. The night is your ally, and the terror of the enemy is your fuel. As the first hint of gray touches the eastern sky, you prepare to withdraw. You've done your job. You haven't just killed a few men. You've ruined the morale of 1,000. You let out one final, long, mournful howl, a sound that mimics the local wolves, but carries a distinctly human edge of malice. It is your goodnight to the enemy. You vanish into the brush, leaving behind a camp of men who will be too tired, too jumpy, and too terrified to face you effectively in the light of the coming day. The psychological warfare of the night is exhausting, lonely business, but it is the most effective way to tilt the scales. You feel a sense of grim satisfaction as you reach the safety of your own lines. You've unlocked the past's most primal fear, the thing that speaks your name from the dark. You prepare to rest, knowing that while you sleep, the enemy will be staring into the shadows, waiting for the sound of your voice to return. While the battlefield is where the song of the archer is performed, the vocal cords of the samurai are forged in the oppressive, meditative stillness of the training hall. You are back in the dojo, standing on polished cedar boards that have seen centuries of sweat and focus. This is the world of Kyudo, the way of the bow, where the silence is so profound it feels like a physical weight on your eardrums. In this environment, you aren't allowed to scream, not yet. You spend hours, sometimes days, in total silence, learning to move your body with the grace of a cloud. This is the paradox of your training. The more quiet you are in the dojo, the more terrifying you will be on the field. You are learning to build vocal pressure. Just as you pull the bowstring to its limit to store kinetic energy, you use the silence of training to store spiritual volume. When you finally do release that kiai in combat, it carries the weight of all those hours of held breath and suppressed noise. Historians still argue whether the extreme ritualization of Kyudo was a practical method for training warriors, or if it evolved as a way to preserve the samurai class's identity during long periods of peace. To you, the answer is irrelevant because the results are undeniable. By training in a state of sensory deprivation, you become hyper-aware of your internal state. You learn to hear your own heartbeat, to feel the blood rushing through your fingertips, and to control the minute tremors of your diaphragm. You are becoming a master of your own internal acoustics. You realize that a great war cry isn't about how loud you can yell, but about how much of yourself you can put into the sound. You are training your vocal cords to be as disciplined and resilient as your bowstring. There's a quirky fringe tidbit about these training halls. Some masters would place a single lit candle in the middle of the room and demand that the archer let out a kiai with such focused air pressure that it would extinguish the flame from 10 feet away without the archer moving a muscle. It sounds like a legend from a wandering monk, but it teaches a vital lesson about directed breath. You aren't just spraying sound, you are aiming it. You practice the hasso, the 8th stage of the shot, where the mind, body, and bow become one. In the silence of the dojo, you are perfecting the shape of your voice so that when you are finally in the mud and the smoke, the sound comes out perfectly formed, without you having to think about it. You feel the tension in your shoulders as you hold the draw for minutes on end. Your master walks behind you, his wooden sandals clicking on the floor. He isn't looking at your target, he's looking at the back of your neck. He's looking for the leak the moment your focus wavers and your spirit begins to deflate. If you can't maintain your zanshin in a quiet room with a friendly teacher, how can you expect to hold it while 1,000 men are trying to kill you? You realize that the vocal training is actually willpower training. The silence is a mirror, reflecting your own fears and distractions back at you. You have to learn to shout internally, to fill the room with your presence without making a single peep. You remember the crocodile dung logic, the commitment to a difficult, invisible edge. This silence is your version of that. It is the foundation of your intimidation. When you eventually stand before an enemy and let out that first, earth-shaking name call, they will feel the depth of your training. They will hear the weight of the thousands of hours you spent in silence. A man who has only ever yelled out of anger sounds thin and frantic. A man who has trained in the dojo sounds like a mountain moving. You are developing a vocal authority that cannot be faked. It is the sound of a person who has conquered themselves before they ever tried to conquer someone else. Interestingly, some schools of archery also taught vocal conditioning by having students practice their kiai underwater or while standing under a freezing waterfall. The idea was to force the body to project sound against extreme physical resistance. You felt that cold water hitting your head, the air being knocked out of your lungs, and yet you were expected to produce a clear, resonant tone. It turns your vocal cords into leather. It ensures that no matter how tired, cold, or wounded you are on the battlefield, your instrument will not fail you. You are building a voice that is weatherproof. But there is a danger in the dojo, the danger of becoming too pretty. You've seen archers who perform their rituals perfectly, whose silence is elegant and whose form is flawless, but who have no bite. They are performers, not warriors. You have to maintain the warrior's heart even in the middle of the most beautiful ceremony. You have to remind yourself that the bow is a tool of death, not just a prop for a dance. You keep a small, sharp edge of aggression hidden beneath your calm exterior. Your silence in the dojo is the silence of a coiled snake, not the silence of a stone. You look at the Makawara, the straw target just a few feet away. You aren't aiming for a bullseye. You're aiming for the feeling of the release. You pull the string, feeling the silk of your hakama rustle. You are at the peak of your internal pressure. You don't scream, but you let out a long, slow hiss of breath, the kokyu that sounds like steam escaping a kettle. It is a controlled release of energy. You realize that your voice is like a river. Sometimes it needs to be a roaring waterfall, and sometimes it needs to be a deep, silent pool. The dojo is where you learn to be both. As you finish your practice and bow to the shrine, you feel a sense of renewed power. Your vocal cords are rested, but they are tuned. You are ready to take the silence back out into the world and turn it into a weapon. You realize that the most terrifying thing you can do to an enemy isn't just to scream at them, it is to let them hear the silence behind your scream. You are the master of the soundscape, and your training has given you the keys to the kingdom. The sun is setting, casting long shadows across the dojo floor. You pick up your bow and prepare to leave. Tomorrow, you might be back in the mud, back in the smoke, and back in the noise. But you will carry the silence of this room with you. You will be the archer whose voice doesn't just travel through the air, but through the soul. You are ready for the next performance. As you move through the camp, you notice a figure sharpening a naginata. Her movements just as precise and lethal as any man's. This is the Onimusha, the woman warrior, and she is a vital part of the women of the longbow tradition. While history books often focus on the men screaming their names on the front lines, the women are the ones who use these same psychological tactics to defend their family estates. When the men are away at war, you realize that a woman screaming her lineage from the top of a castle wall is, in many ways, even more terrifying to an invading force. It signals that there is no easy target. It tells the enemy that the very soil of the estate is alive and ready to kill. These women use the daikyu with a terrifying, cold efficiency, blending the ritual of the nanori with the desperate, domestic ferocity. Historians still argue whether women in the Heian and Kamakura periods were regular participants in open field battles, or if their role was strictly defensive. However, the chronicles of the Genpei War tell a different story, one of figures like Tomogozen, who could outride and outshoot the strongest men. You feel a deep respect for this. When an Onimusha shouts her name, she isn't just defending her life, she is defending her children, her ancestors, and the very honor of her house. Her voice carries a different frequency, a sharp, piercing clarity that can be heard over the deepest masculine roars. It is a psychological strike that says, you have underestimated this home, and that will be your last mistake. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit about the training of these women. They were often taught to use voice throwing techniques to make it sound like a small group of defenders was actually a much larger garrison. By moving quickly between different arrow loops in a tower and shouting in different registers, a single woman could create a sonic wall that baffled attackers. Imagine being a foot soldier at the gate and hearing 5 different voices, calling out challenges from the battlements, not realizing it. As just one very focused woman with a quiver full of arrows and a very well-trained diaphragm. It's the ultimate defensive hack. You watch an Onimusha notch an arrow. Her form is impeccable, the result of a lifetime of domestic practice. In your world, archery isn't just a military skill. It's a social requirement for the nobility of both genders. You realize that her mental armor is perhaps even thicker than yours. She has to be calm while her world is literally under siege. Her kiai is a declaration of defiance that turns her home into a fortress. You see the enemy's hesitation when they realize they aren't fighting a soft target. The psychological shock of a female voice commanding a defense can break a siege. Before the first ladder is even raised, you remember the crocodile dung logic, the commitment to an extreme advantage. In this case, the advantage is the underestimation factor. By appearing as a traditional lady of the house and then revealing herself as a master archer, the Onimusha gains a massive tactical opening. It is a form of psychological camouflage. The enemy expects a victim. They get a predator. You've seen arrogant young warriors humiliated by being called out and subsequently shot by a woman they thought would be a non-combatant. It is a beautiful, brutal subversion of expectations. Interestingly, the women's longbow was often slightly lighter than the men's, but no less lethal. They focused on vitals and gaps, using their voice to force the enemy to look up and expose their throat or armpit. The Onimusha is a master of the distraction shot. She will scream a mocking insult about the enemy's lack of manners, and while they are processing the jab, her arrow is already in flight. It is a more conversational form of psychological warfare, but it ends in the same silence. You think about the fashion of fear for these women. While they might wear the same oyoroi as men in combat, they often kept their hair long and visible, a deliberate choice to let the enemy know exactly who was defeating them. It was a signature in the wind. When the enemy saw that long hair flowing from beneath a helmet, followed by a shower of perfectly aimed arrows, the psychological impact was devastating. It suggested a level of skill and bravery that surpassed the standard warrior. It made the invaders feel like they were fighting a force of nature rather than a human army. But you also recognize the burden they carry. If they fail, the consequences are more than just a lost field. It's the end of their family line. This gives their voice a weight of absolute necessity. There is no room for ego in their nanori. There is only the mission. You feel a sense of shared purpose with them. You are both parts of a culture that uses sound to define the boundaries of what is acceptable and what is not. A woman's scream on the battlefield is the final boundary. As you prepare to move on, you see her release a shot. The bow snaps, and her voice follows it, a sharp, clear kiai that cuts through the humidity of the evening. It is a sound of absolute certainty. You realize that the women of the longbow aren't a side story. They are a fundamental part of the psychological landscape. They are the guardians of the hearth who have learned to speak the language of the arrow. The world feels a bit safer with them on the walls. You take a final breath, the smell of wood smoke and old silk filling your nostrils. You are ready to rejoin the main force, carrying with you the image of the woman who used her voice to turn a house into a legend. The psychological intimidation of the samurai is a family affair. The humidity of the Japanese midsummer is a physical opponent, a heavy, wet blanket that clings to your skin and seeps into the very pores of your equipment. You stand on a ridge, overlooking a narrow pass, feeling the salt of your own sweat stinging your eyes. This is where you must learn the art of weathering the storm. To the uninitiated, a rainy day is just an inconvenience, but to you, it is a crisis of logistics and vocal cords. You feel the tension in your deiku change as the bamboo drinks in the moisture from the air. The glue, that ancient concoction of fish and wood, begins to soften, and the wood itself becomes sluggish. Your unsnappy weapon now feels like a living, tired thing. And then there is your voice. The salt air and the dampness have turned your throat into a rasping Rames. You attempt to scream your name, but it comes out as a jagged crack, a sound that lacks the divine resonance of a clear day. This is a moment of profound psychological vulnerability. If you sound weak, you are weak. Historians still argue whether certain major battles were delayed specifically because of the humidity's effect on bowstrings, or if the samurai simply pivoted to the sword when the rainward set in. You, however, cannot afford to pivot. You have to maintain the illusion of invincibility even when your bow is at 70% power and your voice is at 50%. You learn the wet weather kiai, a shorter, sharper burst of sound that relies more on the explosive snap of the diaphragm than the sustained resonance of the throat. It's a survival tactic. You are trying to project a dry confidence in a wet world. You realize that the enemy is likely suffering from the same damp despair. The winner will be the one who can fake a loud, clear spirit the longest. There's a quirky fringe tidbit about the lengths archers would go to protect their strings. Many carried a spare string inside their kabuto helmet using the warmth of their own head to keep the hemp dry and the resin supple. Imagine the smell: damp hair, old incense, and fishers and all cooking together under an iron lid. It's a bit like wearing a very small, very smelly sauna on your head. But when you pull that dry string out in the middle of a downpour, the psychological edge it gives you is immense. You can fire a crisp, whizzing shot while your opponent's arrows are tumbling out of the air like wet noodles. You follow the shot with a roar that sounds remarkably healthy, simply because you aren't struggling with a soggy bow. You watch the mist roll in, obscuring the enemy's movements. This fog of war is literally made of water. You use your voice as a sonar. By shouting into the mist, you are listening for the texture of the silence that follows. If the sound dies instantly, the air is too thick and the enemy is far. If it bounces back with a sharp echo, you've hit a wall of men or a line of shields. You are painting the battlefield with sound because your eyes have failed you. You realize that your intimidation has to become more frequent now. You need to remind the enemy you are still there. Even if they can't see you, you become a voice in the clouds, a spectral threat that could strike from any direction. You remember the crocodile dung logic, the extreme commitment to an edge. In the rain, your edge is your mino, the traditional straw rain cape. It looks like you're wearing a shaggy, yellow haystack, but it sheds water perfectly, keeping your silk sleeves from becoming waterlogged and heavy. It allows you to maintain the range of motion needed for a full draw. You see the enemy archers, their expensive silk dripping and weighing them down, their movements becoming slow and clumsy. You let out a mocking laugh, a sharp ha, that carries through the rain. You are using the weather to highlight your own preparedness. You are the master of the elements, and they are just victims of the season. Interestingly, the humidity also changes the ballistics of the scream. Sound travels faster in humid air, but the high frequencies are absorbed more quickly. This means your high-pitched challenges lose their bite, but your low-end, guttural roars become even more booming and ominous. You shift your vocal palette to the bass range. You want to sound like the thunder that is currently rumbling in the distance. You are trying to synchronize your psychological warfare with the storm itself. If you can time your kiai with a literal lightning strike, you've achieved the ultimate divine endorsement. But the physical toll of weathering the storm is brutal. The cold dampness makes your joints ache, and the salt from your sweat, mixed with rainwater, creates a stinging paste that runs into your eyes. You have to keep your hands dry, or the bow will slip. You find yourself wiping your palms on your straw cape every few seconds. You realize that the zen of the dojo is a luxury. Here, the zen is just staying upright and keeping your string from snapping. You take a deep, wet breath, feeling the moisture in your lungs. You are ready to let out one more roar, a defiant sound that tells the storm and the enemy that you are not yet broken. You look at your arrow fletching. The feathers are starting to clump together. You know you only have a few more clean shots before the aerodynamics go to hell. You decide to make this next one a psychological grand finale. You notch the arrow, feeling the slickness of the wood. You find a target in the mist, a blurry shape that looks like a commander. You don't just scream a name. You scream a curse, a low, vibrating sound that seems to come from the very mud beneath your feet. It is the sound of a man who has become one with the rain. The release is heavy and lacks the usual snap, but it is true. The arrow disappears into the gray curtain. You don't wait to see it hit. You let out a long, sustained roar of spirit that fills the silence left by the rain. You are the ghost of the ridge. You are the reason the enemy won't sleep tonight, even if they stay dry. You have successfully weathered the storm, and in doing so, you have turned the weather into your most terrifying ally. The clouds begin to break, just a little, letting a single ray of pale light hit your straw cape. You look like a golden demon rising from the mist. You take a final, shaky breath, your voice finally giving out. But it doesn't matter. The message has been sent. The humidity might have dampened your string, but it has only amplified your legend. You feel the world tilt beneath your feet, but it isn't the exhaustion, it's the sea. You are standing on the deck of a rocking boat in the Shimonoseki Strait, the narrow corridor of water where the final act of the Genpei War is unfolding. This is the duel at Danura, Japan's greatest naval archery battle. Here, the physics of the asymmetrical grip meets the unpredictable violence of the waves. You are braced against the gunwale, your feet wide apart, trying to absorb the jarring impact of the hull hitting the swells. The air is thick with salt spray and the smell of wet wood and blood. You look across the churning water at a Taira ship, and you realize that your voice is your only way to be heard over the deafening roar of the ocean. You have to scream your name over the crashing waves, the creaking of timber, and the whizzing of 1,000 arrows. It is a battle of acoustic dominance in a theater of salt and spray. Historians still argue whether the archers at Danura primarily fired from a stationary position, while the ships were lashed together, or if they were sniping at each other during the frantic, high-speed maneuvers of the tidal currents. You, however, feel the terrifying reality of the moving deck. You are trying to lead your target while your platform is dropping 5 feet every 3 seconds. In this chaos, the ballistic variable of intimidation is more important than ever. If you can shout a challenge that reaches the enemy's ears clearly despite the wind and water, you are demonstrating a superhuman level of control. You are telling them that the ocean itself cannot silence you. You see the enemy archers struggling. They are clutching the railings, their faces pale with seasickness and fear. You, however, let out a kiai that cuts through the gale like a siren's call. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit about this naval engagement. Legend has it that the Taira placed a folding fan atop a mast and challenged the Minamoto to hit it as a test of divine favor. The archer Nasuno Yoichi famously rode his horse into the waves, calmed his mind, and shot the fan clean off. While you aren't trying to hit a fan today, the psychological weight of that story hangs over the water. Every shot you take is a repeat of that legend. You find yourself focusing on a specific enemy commander, shouting his name with a rhythmic intensity that matches the pulse of the tides. You are using the ocean's own power to amplify your threat. You feel the logistics of the quiver becoming a nightmare. If your arrows fall into the salt water, the glue will dissolve even faster than in the rain. You've lashed your yabira tightly to your back, protecting the fletching with the leather hood. Every time you reach for a shaft, you have to time it between the splashes of the waves. You realize that you only have one chance to make a vocal impression before the ships collide or drift apart. You choose a kabura-ya, a whizzing arrow, but its sound is almost swallowed by the wind. You compensate by putting more spirit into your own voice. You aren't just screaming, you are roaring against the very concept of the horizon. You want your name to be the last thing the Taira hear before the sea claims them. Interestingly, the salt air does something strange to your vocal cords. It acts as a natural astringent, tightening the tissues and making your voice higher and more piercing. You sound like a hawk over the water. You use this to your advantage, pitching your insults to a frequency that carries over the low-frequency rumble of the boats. You are frequency hopping your psychological warfare. You see a Taira warrior look up, startled by the clarity of your voice. He can't believe you're still talking about your ancestors while your boat is nearly vertical. This is the duel at Danara in a nutshell, a contest of who can remain a human, the longest in an environment that wants to turn everyone into flotsam. You remember the crocodile dung logic, the commitment to an extreme, even absurd, advantage. In this case, your advantage is your sea legs. You've trained on the shifting sands of the coast, learning to keep your core, your hair stable while the world moves. You look at your bow, the lacquer stinging with salt. You know that once the wood dries, it might crack from the salt crystals, but for now, it is your lifeline. You notch an arrow, aiming not at the man, but at the spot where he will be once the next wave passes. You let out a short, sharp kiai that acts as your internal release signal, but the physical toll of a sea battle is unique. The spray is constant, blinding you and making the grip of the bow dangerously slick. You find yourself using a piece of shark skin wrapped around the handle for extra friction. You realize that your fashion of fear is now covered in white salt crusts, making you look like a ghost risen from the deep. You lean into this imagery. You call out to the enemy that the sea spirits are on your side, that the very tide has turned against them, which, historically, it actually did during the battle. You are turning a geographical fact into a psychological death warrant. You look down at the water. It is a swirling vortex of red and blue, the colors of the rival clans' banners, and the blood of the fallen. The psychological weight of the finality of this battle is immense. There is no retreating from a boat. It is victory or the abyss. You feel your voice gaining a desperate, final edge. You aren't just shouting for glory now. You are shouting to keep your soul from sinking. You find the commander again. He's looking at the water, his bow forgotten. You've broken him. The ocean did half the work, but your voice did the rest. The ships crunch together with the sickening sound of splintering wood. The archery duel is over. The boarding has begun. But as you drop your bow to reach for your naginata, you realize that the air is still ringing with your name. You've left your mark on the strait. You take a final, salt-burned breath, your lungs heavy with the sea. You are ready for the close-quarters struggle. But you know that the duel at Danara was won the moment your voice reached across the waves and took the heart out of the enemy. The tide is pulling the wreckage out to sea. You stand on the blood-slicked deck, a survivor of the greatest naval clash in your history. You take a moment to look at the horizon, the sun setting over the water. You are the archer who spoke louder than the sea, and the sea, for once, listened. You stand on the drying mud of the riverbank, the adrenaline of the charge beginning to curdle into a cold, prickly sense of exposure. This is the moment every samurai fears but few discuss. The honor, ego, and the missed shot. You have just performed the most elaborate nanori of your career. You stood before the ranks, projected your voice with the resonance of a temple bell, and detailed 3 generations of military excellence. You called out a high-status rival, ensuring every scribe and general was watching. You drew your deikyu with perfect form, your zanchin seemingly unshakable, and then, as you released the string with a thunderous kiai, a sudden gust of wind or a momentary slip of the thumb glove sent your arrow sailing harmlessly into a nearby willow tree. The silence that follows is more deafening than any war cry. You are left standing there, a mountain of iron and silk, while your ego takes a ballistic hit that no armor can deflect. Historians still argue whether the social consequences of a public miss were enough to drive a samurai to ritual suicide, or if the chaos of battle allowed for a quick mulligan. Without losing too much face, you, however, feel the weight of the collective gaze. In a culture where your name is your primary weapon, Missing your target after shouting that name is like a modern influencer accidentally posting a video with their filters turned off. You have shattered the illusion of your invincibility. You realize that the psychological intimidation you were building has just been handed over to the enemy. You see a flicker of a smile on the face of the man you were trying to kill. He isn't afraid of you anymore. He thinks you're a loudmouth amateur. This is the ego trap of the vocal archer. By being loud, you've ensured that everyone notices when you fail. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit about how samurai handled these awkward moments. Some warriors were known to carry blame-shifting charms, small talismans meant to ward off mischievous spirits that might nudge an arrow off course. If you missed, you could technically blame a localized supernatural interference rather than your own lack of skill. It's the 12th century version of saying lag. When you lose a video game, you find yourself glancing at the sky as if looking for a stray crow that might have distracted you. But deep down, you know the truth. You let your ego get ahead of your aim. You prioritized the shout over the shot, and now you have to live with the silence. You feel the urge to immediately notch another arrow and fire again to prove it was a fluke. But your training warns you against panic shooting. That is the quickest way to turn a single mistake into a total reputational collapse. You have to use your Zanshin to reset your reality. You take a slow, deliberate breath, forcing your heartbeat to slow down. You don't look away from your opponent. You maintain your iron mask's glare as if the miss was a calculated warning shot. You use your voice again, but this time, it isn't a boast, it's a cold, low-frequency promise. You tell him that the first arrow was for his ancestors to see, and the second is for his heart to feel. You are attempting to rebrand your failure as a theatrical choice. Interestingly, this social fallout is why the bureaucracy of the battlefield was so vital. If you had witnesses who saw your form was perfect, they might vouch for the unlucky wind rather than your incompetence. You realize that your status is a fragile thing, built on the consensus of your peers. One bad afternoon can erase a decade of bullseyes. You look at the scribes on the ridge, their brushes poised. You need your next action to be spectacular. You decide to forego the long introduction for the next shot. You will let the bow do the apologizing. The psychological pressure has shifted. Now you are the one who has to prove yourself. You remember the crocodile dung logic, the commitment to a difficult edge. In this case, your edge is your stoicism. If you can miss a shot in front of 1,000 people and not flinch, you are demonstrating a terrifying level of mental control. You are saying, my spirit is so large that even a failure does not diminish me. You notch your second arrow with a speed and grace that suggests you are a machine. You don't scream this time. You let out a kiai that is more of a sharp, metallic hiss. It is the sound of a predator refocusing. You see the enemy's smile fade. They realize that a humiliated samurai is much more dangerous than a proud one. But the physical toll of eager recovery is heavy. Your muscles are tighter now, fueled by a toxic mix of shame and determination. You have to fight the bad tension that wants to ruin your release. You focus on your hera, the center of your gravity. You tell yourself that the bow doesn't care about your reputation. It only cares about the physics of the string. You strip away the Tanaka the archer and become the process of the correction. You realize that the most important part of the screaming archer tradition isn't the scream itself, but the ability to keep screaming after you've stumbled. You look at the target again. He's gotten cocky, stepping out from behind his shield to mock you. This is his mistake. He's let his guard down. Because he thinks you're a joke, you use his own psychological error against him. You release the string, and this time, there is no gust of wind. The arrow flies with a flat, angry trajectory, cutting through the air with a sound like tearing silk. It strikes home, exactly where you intended. The ego has been restored, but at a high cost of spiritual energy. The silence that follows this hit is different. It is a silence of respect, and perhaps a little bit of fear. You've shown that you can fail and still deliver. You take a final, deep breath, feeling the tension drain out of your shoulders. You realize that the honor, ego, and the missed shot is a vital part of the warrior's journey. It keeps you humble, and it keeps your intimidation grounded in reality. You aren't a god. You're just a man who has practiced a very difficult thing until his mistakes are rare. As you reach for your next arrow, you feel a sense of clarity. The shout is a tool, but the shot is the truth. You prepare to speak again, but this time, your voice is quieter, more certain. You have nothing left to prove to the willow trees. Your target is the only audience that matters now. The air on the battlefield begins to smell less of wood smoke and more of sulfur, a sharp, biting stench that signals the end of your era. You stand on the crest of a hill, looking down at a line of men who aren't carrying 7-foot bows or wearing colorful silk. They are carrying long, heavy tubes of iron and wood, the Tanegashima, or matchlock muskets. This is the decline of the bow. You realize that the thwack of the bowstring, a sound that has defined your culture for centuries, is slowly being drowned out by the thunderous crack of gunpowder. The psychological warfare you've mastered is being rendered obsolete by a weapon that requires only a few weeks of training to kill a man who has practiced archery for 20 years. When you scream your name now, it feels like shouting into a hurricane. The musketeer doesn't care about your lineage. He just cares about the slow match staying lit. You are witnessing the democratization of death, where the screaming archer is being replaced by the silent volley. Historians still argue whether the bow remained superior in terms of rate of fire and accuracy well into the 16th century, or if the sheer psychological shock of the firearm was what truly broke the samurai's dominance. You feel the truth of the latter. The sound of 100 muskets firing at once is a sensory assault that no kiai can match. It is a mechanical, impersonal noise that strips away the human element of the duel. There is no call-out culture here. A bullet doesn't have a name, and it doesn't listen to yours. You feel a profound sense of obsolescence. Your fashion of fear is useless against a lead ball that can punch through your lacquered iron plates as if they were paper. You are a relic of a poetic age, standing in the path of a technological one. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit about this transition. Some traditionalist archers were so offended by the musket that they refused to even look at one, believing the weapon was cowardly because it required no spiritual discipline. There are accounts of samurai trying to use their kiai to literally blow the bullets off course, a desperate attempt to apply Zen physics to ballistics. You find a tragic humor in this. You've spent your life turning your body into a weapon of spirit, only to be outclassed by a peasant with a tube of iron and some ground-up charcoal. It is a 16th century version of bringing a knife to a gunfight, but with more ancestral shame. You look at your Deikyu. It feels lighter, more fragile. You realize that your intimidation now has to be directed at your own side. You use your voice to keep your men from breaking when the first musket volley hits. You shout about the old ways, about the honor that cannot be found in a puff of smoke. You are trying to act as a psychological anchor in a sea of technological panic, but you see the fear in your students' eyes. They've seen the thundersticks in action. They know that the physics of the asymmetrical grip doesn't matter. When the enemy can kill you from twice your effective range without even breaking a sweat, you are fighting a losing battle against the efficiency of the new world. Interestingly, some archers tried to adapt by creating super heavy bows that could outrange the early muskets, but the physical toll was too great. You've seen men ruin their shoulders trying to pull bows with 150 pounds draw weights just to stay relevant. It is a frantic, muscular protest against the inevitable. You realize that the zen of loudness is being replaced by the zen of the trigger. The battlefield is becoming quieter in between the explosions, less talking, more rhythmic, mechanical reloading. The individual superstar is being subsumed by the unit. Your voice is becoming a lonely solo in a world that only wants a choir. You remember the crocodile done logic, the commitment to an edge. In this era, the edge is the realization that you are the last of your kind. You lean into the tragic hero archetype. You use your voice to deliver one final, magnificent nanori, knowing it might be the last time anyone listens. You aren't shouting for the enemy anymore. You're shouting for the history books. You want the world to remember that before the age of iron and smoke, there was an age of wood and spirit. You are the ghost in the machine, the human element that refuses to be silenced by a chemical reaction. But the physical reality is undeniable. The smoke from the muskets creates a permanent fog over the field, making it impossible to see the gaps in the armor you used to target. Your archery has become a blind game of chance. You find yourself reverting to the silent but deadly style of the commoner just to survive. You hate it. It feels like a betrayal of everything you were taught. You realize that the decline of the bow is actually the decline of the individual. The musket is a weapon of the masses. The bow is a weapon of the elite. As the social order shifts, so does the sound of the war. You look at the enemy line again. They are reloading, their movements robotic and synchronized. They don't have lineages, they have drills. You take a deep, smoky breath, feeling the grit of the gunpowder in your teeth. You decide that if you are to go down, you will go down as a samurai. You notch your arrow a beautiful, white-fletched shaft and prepare your final shout. You aren't aiming for a kill, you're aiming for a statement. You want the sound of your bow to be heard. Just for a second, over the roar of the guns. The release is perfect. The arrow disappears into the smoke, a silver needle in a gray haystack. You let out a kiai that is the loudest of your life, a raw, guttural expression of your entire existence. For a brief moment, you feel like you've won. You've made a human sound in a mechanical world. But then, the next volley of musketry erupts, and your voice is swallowed again. You are a man out of time, but you are a man with a bow, and that, for now, is enough. The sun is obscured by the smoke of 1,000 barrels. You reach for your next arrow, knowing that the decline of the bow is nearly complete. But as long as you have one shaft left and one breath in your lungs, the screaming archer will not be silent. You are the final verse of an epic poem, and you intend to finish it. The smoke of the 16th century has cleared, and the muddy fields of the Heian and Kamakura periods have been replaced by the quiet, polished cedar of a 21st century dojo. You are standing in the present day, but as you grip the daikyu, you realize that the ancient warriors didn't disappear, they just evolved. This is the modern echoes in the dojo. You see the same 7-foot asymmetrical bow, the same leather thumb glove, and the same intense, meditative focus. But most importantly, you hear it, the kiai. When a modern practitioner releases an arrow, the shout that erupts from their lungs is the direct descendant of the screams that once chilled the blood of enemies on the battlefield. You realize that today's martial arts still carry the DNA of those ancient, terrifying vocalizations. We no longer shout to claim a rice field or to prove a lineage to a lord, but we shout to prove something to ourselves. The psychological warfare has turned inward. Historians still argue whether the modern kiai is a faithful reconstruction of medieval battle cries, or if it has been sanitized for the peaceful practice of kyudo. You, however, can feel the primal power in the sound. It isn't just a vocal exercise, it is a bridge through time. When the room vibrates with a perfectly timed spirit yell, you aren't just hearing a student in 2026, you are hearing the echo of the call-out culture, the zen of loudness, and the Mongol shock. The intimidation factor is now a tool for mental discipline. We use the shout to break through our own internal fog of war, to silence the voices of doubt and distraction that live in our modern minds. It is the 21st century version of psychological intimidation, where the enemy is your own wavering focus. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit about modern kyudo competitions. Judges actually award points for the quality of the archer's presence and their vocalization, even if the arrow misses the target. It is a rare sport where vibes are a literal metric of success. You find a strange comfort in this. It means the theater of the battlefield hasn't died. It has just moved to a different stage. You've seen archers who hit the bullseye with every shot, but are marked down because their spirit felt hollow because they were silent when they should have been roaring. It is the ultimate legacy of the samurai, the belief that how you do a thing is just as important as the result. You are still a professional, and the fashion of fear has been replaced by the fashion of form. You look at the younger generation of students. They are staring at their phones 1 minute and gripping the ancient bamboo the next. You realize that the logistics of the quiver has changed. We don't worry about running out of arrows, we worry about running out of meaning. We use the bow to find a sense of realness in a digital world. When you scream in the dojo, you are making a sound that cannot be compressed, edited, or filtered. It is a raw, analog expression of life. You are teaching your vocal cords to be an anchor in a world that is moving too fast. The physics of the asymmetrical grip still provides that same challenging seesaw effect, reminding you that life is inherently unbalanced, and you must find your own center to survive it. Interesting lie. Some modern sports psychologists are now studying the kiai to see how it affects peak performance. They are discovering what you've known for 1,000 years, that a directed vocalization can increase core stability and focus the brain. You find it amusing that science is finally catching up to the spirit yell. You see researchers with sensors and microphones trying to measure the intimidation you've been practicing since the dawn of the shogunate. They are looking for the ballistic variables, while you are just looking for the truth. The modern echo is a confirmation that the samurai weren't just lucky, they were right about how the human mind and body work together. You remember the crocodile dung logic, the extreme commitment to an edge. In the modern dojo, your edge is your authenticity. If you scream just to be loud, everyone knows. But if you scream from your hera, the room feels it. You are practicing the art of being seen in an age where everyone is hiding behind screens. By standing in the spotlight and declaring your presence with a shout, you are performing a revolutionary act. You are reclaiming the weight of the name. You might not be shouting about your great-grandfather's bravery, but you are shouting about your own right to be present, focused, and powerful. But you have to be careful not to let the modern dojo become a museum. The modern echoes are only valuable if they are still loud. You've seen schools where the kiai has become a polite, whispered suggestion, a soft version of the ancient roar. You reject this. You believe that to respect the past, you have to keep its edges sharp. You encourage the students to find their inner demon, the iron-masked warrior who doesn't care about being polite. You want them to feel the fashion of fear even if they are wearing clean cotton instead of lacquered iron. You want the dojo to shake when they let go of the string. You look at the daikyu in your hands. It is made of carbon fiber and high-tech laminates now, but the soul of the wood is still there. You realize that the modern echoes are a way of keeping the ancestors alive, as long as someone is willing to stand in a quiet room and scream at a straw target. The screaming archer is not dead. You are the link between the muddy valleys of Hyeonkyo and the glass towers of today. You take a deep, modern breath, feeling the air fill your lungs. You are ready to show the world that the old sounds are still the most powerful ones. The silence of the dojo is waiting. You notch your arrow, the carbon fiber clicking against the string. You aren't aiming for a trophy, you are aiming for a connection. You prepare your voice, feeling the ball of fire in your belly. You are ready to let out a shout that will travel through time, a sound that says, I am here. The modern world is about to hear 1,000 years of history in a single second. The sun is dipping low, casting long, amber shadows across the ground as you reach back into your yabira one last time. This is the final notch. Your quiver is nearly empty. Only a single arrow remains, a beautiful shaft of soot-blackened bamboo with fletching taken from the wings of a mountain hawk. You feel the weight of the entire day, the screams, the mud, the rocking boats, and the scent of gunpowder settling into your bones. Your voice is a ghost of its former self, a rasping whisper that has spent its currency of lineage and insults. But as you look across the field, now quiet and littered with the debris of 1,000 stories, you realize that this final shot isn't about killing anymore. It's about the period at the end of the sentence. You aren't just an archer. You are the final witness to a world that is slowly fading into the twilight of history. You notch the arrow with a slow, agonizingly perfect motion, feeling the silk of your sleeve brush against the bow's lacquer. This is your vocal legacy, delivered not in a roar, but in the ultimate, focused silence of the release. Historians still argue whether the final arrow of a samurai was a ritualized act of defiance, or simply the last desperate move of a man with nothing left to lose. You, however, feel a sense of profound completion. You have unlocked the past by becoming its most vocal advocate, and now you are ready to let it go. By screaming your name all day, you have carved your identity into the memory of this land. Even if you fall, the air here will always vibrate with the frequency of your ancestors. You realize that psychological intimidation was never just about winning a fight. It was about refusing to be forgotten. You are the screaming archer, the one who dared to be loud in a world that eventually demands silence from everyone. You feel the physics of the asymmetrical grip one last time, a familiar, uneven pressure that has become as much a part of you as your own pulse. There's a quirky fringe tidbit about these final moments in ancient chronicles. It was said that a master archer's last arrow wouldn't just fly through the air, but through time itself, carrying the spirit of the warrior into the dreams of future generations. You look at the black arrow and wonder who will find it centuries from now. Will they understand the weight of the name it carried? Will they hear the echo of your kiai when they touch the bamboo? You find a strange, quiet joy in this thought. You aren't just a soldier, you are a time traveler. You've used your voice to bridge the gap between the divine and the mortal, and now you are sending a message to the future. It's a bit like a message in a bottle, but with a much sharper point. You draw the string back, your muscles groan, a symphony of fatigue that you acknowledge and then ignore. You enter the final state of Zanshin. The world is no longer a battlefield, it's a canvas of light and shadow. You see your final target, not a man, but the very horizon itself. You prepare your last kiai. It won't be a scream of anger or a boast of bloodline. It will be a spirit yell of gratitude. You are thanking the bow for its strength, the horse for its heart, and the enemy for the challenge that made you who you are. You feel the ball of fire in your lower belly ignite for the last time. It is a warm, steady glow that fills your entire chest. You are the eye of the storm, the center of the universe, and the master of the sound. Interestingly, this final notch is where the zen of loudness reaches its ultimate expression. You realize that the loudest sound you can make is the one that follows the release. It is the silence of an arrow that has found its mark. You are aiming for the truth that lives in the gap between the heartbeats. You've spent the day being the biggest, loudest thing on the horizon, but in this moment, you are becoming invisible. You are dissolving into the process. You are the bow, the arrow, and the air. The intimidation is gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of belonging. You are exactly where You are supposed to be doing exactly what you were born to do. You remember the crocodile dung logic, the commitment to an extreme, even absurd, advantage. Your advantage now is your peace. While others are still frantic, still screaming in fear or pain, you are as still as a stone at the bottom of a river. You have nothing left to prove. You have shouted your name until the heavens know it by heart. You notch the arrow, feeling the click of the string. You take a final, deep, diaphragmatic breath. This is the breath that will carry your spirit into the next world. You aren't just an archer. You are the roar of the samurai, finally finding its rest. The release is the most beautiful thing you have ever experienced. The string slips from your thumb like a secret being told at midnight. There is no whip, no vibration, only a smooth, endless flight. The arrow disappears into the golden light of the setting sun, a black needle sewing the earth to the sky. You let out a kiai that is so soft it is almost a whisper, yet it carries the power of 1,000 years of history. It is the sound of it is finished. You stand there, your bow arm still raised, your lingering mind watching the spot where the arrow vanished. The psychological warfare is over. The silence has returned, but it is a different kind of silence now. It is a silence that has been earned. You look down at your empty quiver. You feel a sense of lightness that is almost intoxicating. You have spent your vocabulary of war, and you are left with the eloquence of peace. You take a final look at the field, the smoke, and the fading light. You have unlocked the past, and in doing so, you have found your own place within it. You are ready to lay down the bow and walk into the twilight. The screaming archer has finally said everything he needed to say. Now, as the final image of that archer fades from your mind, feel the weight of your own body settling into your bed or your chair. The sounds of the battlefield have been replaced by the soft, rhythmic hum of the world around you. Let the tension in your shoulders dissolve, just like the tension in that ancient bow. Your journey through the mud and the mist, the salt spray and the gunpowder, has come to its natural end. The names have been called, the arrows have been spent, and the stories have been etched into the quiet air of the night. You are safe, you are still, and the echoes of the past are now just a gentle lullaby, a reminder of a world that valued the spirit as much as the strike. The light of the sunset has turned into the soft darkness of your room. Your breathing is slow and deep, mirroring the kokyu of the master in the dojo. There are no more enemies to intimidate, no more lineages to declare. There is only the peace of a story well told and a journey well traveled. Let your mind drift like that final, soup-blackened arrow, floating effortlessly into the golden horizon of your dreams. The samurai have found their rest, and now it is time for you to find yours. Sleep deeply, knowing that the strength and the spirit of the archer are a part of the history that cradles us all. Hey everyone, tonight we are stepping back into a world where the air is thick with more than just the morning mist of a Japanese river valley. Imagine yourself standing on a ridge, the weight of lacquered leather and iron plates pressing into your shoulders, and the damp grass soaking through your splitto socks. The silence of the dawn is so heavy it feels physical, until suddenly, it isn't just broken, it's shattered. A man on a horse, draped in silk and steel, doesn't just charge at you. He screams your grandfather's name. He tells you exactly who he is, who his ancestors were, and precisely why your soul is about to be evicted from your body. In this era, a silent warrior was an invisible one, and an invisible warrior didn't get famous. You're standing there, heart hammering against your ribs, realizing that you probably wouldn't survive this for more than 30 seconds, mostly because you'd be too busy trying to remember if you left the oven on back in 2026 to focus on the 6-foot bow pointed at your chest. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, I love seeing how far these stories travel, so go ahead and drop your location and your local time in the comments. Is it a rainy midnight in London or a sunny afternoon in Sydney? Let me know. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are a samurai in the late Heian period, and the world you inhabit is governed by a set of rules that would seem utterly alien to a modern soldier. We often think of snipers as ghosts, men who hide in ghillie suits and try to remain as quiet as a heartbeat. But for you, the bow is a megaphone. To be a master of the daikyu, the Japanese longbow, is to be a master of theater. You aren't just trying to put a piece of sharpened bamboo through a gap in someone's armor. You are performing a ritual. The ground beneath your feet is muddy, the smell of damp earth and horse sweat filling your nostrils. You reach back, feeling the textured grip of your bow, which towers over you at over 7 feet tall. It's asymmetrical, a designed quirk that looks a bit like a top-heavy fishing rod. but it's the pinnacle of technology for your time. As you look across the field, you see your opponent. He isn't hiding, he's vibrant. His armor is laced with bright silk cords, crimson, gold, and deep indigo. He looks like a deadly tropical bird, and then he starts shouting. This is the Nanori, the ritualized introduction. He is bellowing his lineage, tracing his family tree back 3 generations just to make sure you know exactly whose reputation is on the line. It's a bit like a modern MMA fighter's walkout music, but instead of Eye of the Tiger, it's a detailed oral history of feudal land grants and heroic deaths. You realize that in this moment, the psychological weight of his words is designed to make your hands shake. Before you even notch an arrow, historians still argue whether these verbal exchanges were as formal as the chronicles suggest, or if the chaos of actual combat turned them into a cacophony of half-finished sentences and panicked screams. Regardless, the intent was clear. The battle was won in the mind before the string was even released. You feel the vibration of his voice in your own chest. It's an intimidation tactic that prioritizes ego over stealth. In the West, we have the silent but deadly trope. But here, if you aren't loud, you basically don't exist in the eyes of the gods or your lord. You're essentially playing a high-stakes game of guess who. But the penalty for a wrong answer is a whizzing arrow to the throat. The bow itself, the daikyu, is a masterpiece of laminating bamboo and wood, held together by fish glue that smells, well, exactly like you'd expect ancient fish glue to smell. It's remarkably light for its size, but pulling it requires a level of back strength that would make a modern gym-goer weep. You've been training since you were a child, not just to hit a target, but to breathe in a way that allows you to scream, while your muscles are under hundreds of pounds of tension. It's a bit like trying to sing opera while bench pressing your own body weight. If you've ever tried to yell while holding a heavy grocery bag, you have about 1% of the experience needed to be a samurai archer. Interestingly, a fringe tidbit that often gets lost in the glamorization of the samurai is that these bows were so sensitive to humidity that a sudden rainstorm could actually cause the glue to soften, essentially turning your deadly weapon into a very expensive floppy stick. Imagine the sheer awkwardness of screaming your name, declaring your intent to conquer the world, and then having your bow literally unspool in your hands because the clouds decided to open up. It is the 12th century equivalent of your phone dying right as you're about to show someone a really great meme. You just have to stand there, soaking wet, while your opponent laughs from across the field. But today, the weather holds. The air is crisp, and the tension is rising. You see the other archers on your side beginning their own chants. It's a symphony of aggression. You aren't just one man. You are a representative of your entire clan's history. If you miss, you aren't just a bad shot, you've embarrassed your great-grandfather, who, according to the guy currently yelling at you, was apparently a very subpar horseman. The pressure is immense. You feel the urge to check your grip one last time. The asymmetry of the bow means you hold it about 2/3 of the way down. This allows you to use it on horseback without hitting the horse's head with the bottom of the bow. But it also means the vibrations after a shot are wild and unpredictable. You watch as an officer steps forward. He isn't holding a sword. He's holding a kabura-ya, a whizzing arrow with a large, carved wooden bulb at the tip. This is the signal. When that arrow flies, it will create a high-pitched, eerie moan that sounds like a ghost crying out in the wind. It's meant to get the attention of the kami, the spirits, to let them know that the entertainment is about to begin. It's a formal invitation to a massacre. You take a deep breath, matching your pulse to the rhythm of the wind. Your thumb, protected by a hard leather glove with a specialized groove, hooks around the hemp string. This isn't the three-finger draw you might have learned in summer camp. This is the Mongolian draw, a thumb-heavy grip that provides a powerful, snapping release. As the whizzing arrow begins its flight, the psychological warfare shifts gears, the talking stops, and the screaming begins in earnest. You realize that the goal isn't just to kill the enemy, but to break their will. If you can make them believe that you are an unstoppable force of nature, a demon in silk clothing, they might flinch. And in the world of high-speed archery, a flinch is as good as a funeral. You prepare your own voice, feeling the air fill your lungs, ready to project your identity into the chaos. You are a part of a tradition where the arrow is the period at the end of a very loud, very violent sentence. As the echo of the whizzing arrow fades into the valley, your hands find the familiar curve of the daikyu. It is a towering, elegant monster of a weapon, standing nearly 7.5 feet tall. If you stood it up on its end, it would dwarf even the tallest warrior in your clan. You reach out and run your hand along the lacquered surface, feeling the cool, smooth finish that protects the layers of bamboo and wood beneath. This isn't just a tool, it's a status symbol. While the common foot soldiers, the ashigaru, might carry shorter, mass-produced bows, your deikyu is a custom-built extension of your soul. It's built with an intentional asymmetry, with the grip located about 1/3 of the way up from the bottom. To a modern eye, it looks broken or poorly designed, as if someone slipped during the manufacturing process. But you know better. This design is what allows you to transition from standing on the muddy earth to mounting your horse. Without the bottom limb of the bow striking the ground or the horse's flank, you feel the tension in the string, a thick cord made of hemp, coated in a resin called kusun to keep it from fraying under the immense pressure. Historians still argue whether the extreme length of the bow was purely for power, or if it was a deliberate choice to make the archer appear more imposing on the battlefield. A literal big stick policy translated into wood and string. When you hold it, you don't just feel like a soldier, you feel like a monument. The bow's height forces you to stand taller, to occupy more space, and to project an image of absolute dominance. It is a bit like driving a humongous truck through a tiny parking lot. It is not always practical, but everyone certainly knows you've arrived. You look at the weapon and realize that its very shape is a form of psychological warfare. It tells the enemy that you have the strength to tame a giant. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit about these bows that your masters whispered to you during training. The wood remembers the climate where it was born. A bow made in the humid south might lose its temper, or even shatter if taken to the dry, freezing mountains of the north too quickly. You have to treat this weapon like a living, breathing creature, seasoned with oils and kept at just the right temperature. If you neglect it, it might just decide to explode in your face at the exact moment you are trying to look cool in front of your rivals. It's the ultimate high-maintenance relationship. You spend more time grooming your bow than some people spend grooming their hair, ensuring the wax is even and the lashing is tight. You pull a single arrow from your yabira, the open quiver strapped to your back. The arrow is a work of art in its own right, fashioned from bamboo that has been hardened over a fire and fanned until it's perfectly straight. The fletching the feathers comes from large birds of prey, like eagles or hawks. You can feel the barbs of the feathers catching the air as you move. These aren't just for flight stability, they are also color-coded. Your clan uses specific patterns so that after the battle, you can walk through the field of corpses and claim your kills by identifying your specific arrows. It's a grisly version of leave a message after the beep, where the message is a 3-foot shaft of bamboo and the beep is the sound of your enemy's final breath. As you notch the arrow, you perform the hikawake, the act of drawing the bow. Unlike the European longbowmen who pull to the ear, you pull the string well past your face, almost behind your shoulder. This maximizes the draw length, storing a terrifying amount of kinetic energy in those laminated layers of bamboo. Your thumb, encased in that heavy, resin-hardened glove called a yugake, takes the brunt of the weight. You can feel the power thrumming through your arms, a vibration that resonates in your teeth. You aren't just aiming with your eyes, you are aiming with your entire posture. Your feet are planted wide, your hips are squared, and your breath is a controlled, rhythmic cycle. You are a human spring, coiled and ready to snap. Modern sports psychologists would recognize this as a flow state, but to you, it's simply the way you were raised. You've been doing this since you were 5 years old, starting with tiny willow boughs and moving up as your bones hardened. You probably have more calluses on your thumb than most people have on their entire feet. It's a brutal way to grow up, but it ensures that when you stand on this field, the bow feels less like an object and more like a part of your skeletal system. You've reached a point where you don't even have to think about the physics of the shot. Your body just knows how to compensate for the wind and the weight of the arrow. But then, there's the noise. As you hold the draw, the bow itself begins to groan. The layers of wood and glue are under immense stress, protesting the force you're putting on them. It's a low, creaking sound, like a wooden ship tossing in a storm. To your ears, it's a comforting sound, but to the man you're aiming at, it's the sound of an impending disaster. You realize that even before you release the arrow, the bow is speaking. It's telling the world that it is ready to work. You take a moment to appreciate the sheer craftsmanship, the way the lacquer catches the sun, the way the silk bindings at the grip provide just enough friction for your palm. It's a beautiful object designed for a very ugly purpose. You notice a slight wobble in your opponent's stance. He's staring at your bow, perhaps calculating the distance, or perhaps wondering if your deikyu is more powerful than his. This is the mental chess of the samurai. You aren't just looking for a physical opening, you're looking for a crack in his confidence. If he looks at your towering bow and feels even a flicker of doubt, you've already won half the battle. You're essentially playing a game of who has the bigger bow. And in this culture, size really does matter. It's a display of wealth, power, and physical prowess all wrapped up in a single piece of arched wood. You think back to the stories of the legendary archer Minamoto no Tamatomo, who was said to have a bow so powerful it took 5 men to string it, and who allegedly sank a whole ship with a single arrow. Whether that's true or just 12th century clickbait, the legend serves its purpose. It builds the mythos of the archer as a superhuman figure. You aren't just a man with a bow, you are an avatar of your ancestors' strength. Every time you pull that string, you are tapping into a lineage of warriors who believed that a well-placed shot was a divine act. You feel the sweat trickling down your forehead, stinging your eyes, but you don't blink. The tension is almost unbearable, yet you find a strange kind of peace within it. The asymmetry of the bow creates a unique challenge. Because the grip is low, the upper limb is much longer and more flexible than the lower one. This means that when you release, the bow doesn't just snap forward, it twists and vibrates in a specific way called yuga-eri, where the bow actually rotates in your hand, so the string ends up on the outside of your arm. It's a flourish that requires perfect timing. If you mess it up, the string will slap your forearm with enough force to strip the skin right off. It's a built-in fail mechanic that keeps you humble. You've seen beginners walk away with bruises the size of dinner plates because they forgot to respect the twist. You, however, have mastered the dance. You are ready to let the Deku sing. The air between the two armies is thick, not just with the smell of horse sweat and wet grass, but with a palpable sense of spiritual dread. You watch as a senior warrior on your side nudges his horse forward, his hand reaching for a specialized arrow that looks far bulkier than the others. This is the kabura-ya, the whistling arrow, and its rival marks the transition from psychological posturing to actual combat. The tip isn't a sharp point of steel. Instead, it's a large, hollow bulb carved from deer horn or boxwood, perforated with precisely shaped holes. It looks more like a child's toy or a decorative ornament than a weapon of war. But as the archer draws back his bow, the atmosphere shifts. This arrow isn't meant to kill a man, at least not directly. Its purpose is much more profound. It's a direct line to the heavens, a calling card for the gods to come down and witness the bravery that is about to unfold. As the string snaps, the kabura-ya doesn't whistle so much as it wails. It's a haunting, mournful sound that cuts through the low chatter of the ranks, a high-pitched woo that echoes off the surrounding hills. To you, it sounds like the world itself is crying out. This sound is designed to purify the battlefield, driving away evil spirits and ensuring that the kami, the spirits of the land and ancestors, are paying attention. It's the ultimate opening ceremony, but instead of fireworks and a ribbon cutting, you get a screaming piece of wood that lets everyone know the time for talking is officially over. You feel the hair on your arm stand up. It's a sound that triggers something primal, a realization that your life is now in the hands of fate and your own training. Historians still argue whether the kabura-ya was truly effective at scaring horses, or if its psychological impact was purely reserved for the humans on the field. Some suggest that the specific frequency of the whistle was tuned to unsettle the enemy's mounts, turning a disciplined cavalry charge into a chaotic mess of rearing, panicked animals. You've seen it happen. A horse, no matter how well trained, doesn't like it when the air starts screaming at it. It adds another layer of chaos to an already sensory overload environment. You watch the enemy line, looking for that first sign of a horse shying away or a rider struggling to maintain control. If the sound of the arrow can make a 1,000-pound beast flinch, imagine what it's doing to the nerves of the man sitting on top of it. There's a quirky fringe tidbit about these whistling arrows that your elders used to joke about. During the long nights in the barracks, apparently some overambitious archers would carve the holes in their kabura-ya so poorly that instead of a divine whistle, the arrow would emit a pathetic flatulent honk. Imagine the sheer, soul-crushing embarrassment of trying to signal the gods of war and instead sounding like a confused goose. It's the kind of thing that could ruin a reputation for generations. There goes Lord Ichiro, they'd say, the man whose arrow farted at the Minamoto. You make a mental note to always double-check the carving on your own signal arrows. In a culture where honor is everything, a bad acoustic performance is a fate worse than death. As the whistling arrow completes its arc and tumbles into the dirt, the silence that follows is even louder than the noise. It's the breath before the plunge. You realize that the kabura-ya has established the boundaries of the ritual. The battlefield is no longer just a piece of land, it's a stage. You aren't just fighting for territory or taxes, you're fighting for your name to be remembered in the songs and chronicles that will follow. The whizzing arrow is the signal for you to step into that spotlight. You feel a strange sense of clarity. The fear is still there, bubbling in your gut, but it's been pushed aside by the necessity of the performance. You are an actor in a very violent play, and the audience is the entire history of your lineage. You look at the arrows remaining in your quiver. They are silent for now, but you know that once the whistlers have done their job, the real work begins. The kabura-ya has alerted the spirits, but it's your voice and your accuracy that will keep them entertained. You think about the craftsmanship of that wooden bulb, the way it had to be perfectly balanced, so it wouldn't wobble and veer off course. It's a testament to the fact that even the noisemakers in your arsenal are precision engineered. Everything in your kit has a purpose, from the silk cords on your armor to the specific pitch of a whizzing arrow. It's all part of a grand, terrifying machine designed to overwhelm the senses. The use of the kabura-ya also serves a very practical, if slightly cynical, purpose. It prevents sneak attacks. By firing a signal arrow, you are essentially telling the enemy, I see you, and I'm ready for you. It's an act of extreme confidence, bordering on arrogance. It's like sending a "you up" text to a rival before showing up at their front door with a chainsaw. It removes the element of surprise because, in your world, there is more honor in defeating an opponent who is fully prepared than in stabbing someone in their sleep. Of course, this also means you've just given up any chance of an easy victory. You've committed to the hard way, the loud way, the way that gets written down in books. You notice the wind shifting, blowing the last traces of the arrows sound toward the enemy. You can see them adjusting their shields, their eyes darting toward the sky. The psychological pressure is building. They know that the divine portion of the evening is over, and the human portion is about to get very messy. The whizzing arrow was the appetizer. The main course is going to be much sharper and much less musical. You settle your weight, feeling the connection between your feet and the earth. The whistle was a call to the gods, but the next sound the enemy hears will be your own voice, declaring your right to be there. Interestingly, some legends suggest that certain kabura-ya were filled with incense or colored powders, leaving a trail of smoke or scent through the air as they flew. While most historians view this as a later embellishment, you like the idea of your entrance having a scent profile. It adds a certain level of flair to the apocalypse. But regardless of whether it smells like sandalwood or just old wood, the effect is the same. The air has been claimed. The space between the two armies is no longer empty. It's filled with the lingering vibration of that first, haunting cry. You grip your bow tighter, your knuckles turning white against the dark lacquer. The whizzing arrow is a reminder that you are part of something much larger than yourself. You aren't just an individual. You are a link in a chain. The kabura-ya connects you to the warriors of the past who fired the same signals, and to the future warriors who will hear about this day. It's a heavy thought to carry while someone is trying to shoot you, but it's also what keeps you standing straight. You take one last look at the spot where the signal arrow landed, a small marker in the mud. The curtain has risen. The gods are watching. It's time to show them why they should remember your name. The whizzing has stopped, and the air is vacuum sealed in a terrifying silence. This is the moment where the psychological pressure shifts from the divine to the personal. You reach for your next arrow, but before you notch it, you take a breath that feels like it's filling your entire soul. You aren't just a nameless soldier in a sea of iron. You are a representative of a lineage. You step forward, or perhaps you nudge your horse a few paces ahead of the line, and you begin the nanori. You scream. You don't just yell a battle cry. You shout your full name, your father's name, and the names of the illustrious ancestors who fought at battles you've only heard about in songs. You are literally throwing the weight of your family history at the man across the field. In your mind, you aren't just one person, you are a walking, shouting library of military heritage, and you're using that library to try and crush your opponent's spirit. To a modern observer, this looks like the height of tactical insanity. Why on earth would you stand there and tell the enemy exactly who you are, making yourself a high priority target for every archer on the other side? It's the ultimate doxing yourself in real time. But for you, the name is a weapon. By declaring your identity, you are stating that you are a man of worth. You are saying, I am important enough that killing me matters, and I am skilled enough that you should be terrified of me. It's a challenge of the highest order. If the man opposite you has a lesser pedigree, or if his family hasn't won a major battle in 50 years, your very name acts like a physical weight on his shoulders. You are trying to make him feel small. You are trying to make him feel like a footnote in your story. Historians still argue whether these lengthy introductions were actually completed during the heat of a real engagement, or if warriors eventually shortened them to I am Ichiro, prepare to die. Once the arrows started flying, there is a theory that as the scale of battles grew from small skirmishes to massive clashes, the luxury of a 3-minute genealogical monologue became a death sentence. Yet, the chronicles insist on their importance. You feel the truth of it in your gut. When you shout your name, you feel your own fear recede. It is hard to be a coward when you've just reminded 1,000 people that your grandfather was a hero of the Hagen Rebellion. The name isn't just for the enemy. It's a cage for your own wavering courage. It commits you to the act. You've said who you are. Now you have to prove it. There's a quirky fringe tidbit about the Nanori that highlights the sheer ego involved. Some samurai were known to bring heralds or servants whose only job was to stand nearby and shout the master's name even louder, or to verify the master's claims of bravery to anyone who would listen. It's like having a hype man in a rap battle, but instead of yeah, ooh-ha, they're shouting, behold, he is the lord of the 3rd province and he once killed a bear with a T-whisk. It's absurdly theatrical, and yet it worked. If you can convince the guy trying to kill you that you are a legendary figure before the first arrow even leaves the string, he's going to hesitate. And in your world, hesitation is the first stage of rigor mortis. You watch your opponent's reaction. Is his grip tightening on his bow? Is he glancing back at his own commanders for reassurance? This is the weight of the name in action. If you've done your job correctly, he isn't seeing a man, he's seeing a legacy. You are projecting a version of yourself that is invincible. It's a massive bluff. Of course you rate just as susceptible to a piece of sharpened bamboo as he is, but if he believes the bluff, his accuracy will suffer, his heart will race, his palms will sweat, and he'll pull his shot. By screaming your name, you've essentially added a dodge modifier to your own armor. You've made yourself harder to hit by making yourself more prominent. It's a paradox of the battlefield. The louder you are, the safer you might actually be. This tradition also serves a very practical, if slightly bureaucratic, purpose. Remember, there are no dog tags in 12th century Japan. If you want to get paid for your exploits, someone needs to know it was you who did the deed. By shouting your name before the kill, you are establishing a verbal record. You are saying, everyone witness this. I, Lord Taniguchi, am about to take this head. It's a way of ensuring that when the dust settles and the head viewing ceremonies begin, your lord knows exactly who to reward with more rice land or a fancy new horse. It's combat as a career-building exercise. You're essentially tagging your work in a world before social media. You also realize that the name shouting is a form of filtering. By announcing your high status, you are inviting challenges from other high-status warriors. You don't want to waste your time or your expensive arrows on some nameless conscript who was a rice farmer 3 weeks ago. You want the big fish. You want the man whose name is as heavy as yours. There's a strange, mutual respect in this screaming match. You are two elites, acknowledging each other's existence in a world of commoners. It's a deadly conversation between equals. When he shouts back his lineage, you listen closely. You're looking for a name you recognize, a rival clan, or a family feud that spans generations. It turns the battle from a mindless slaughter into a personal vendetta. The psychological toll of this is immense. Imagine the pressure of living up to a name that has been shouted on battlefields for 200 years. You aren't just fighting for your life. You're fighting for the honor of people who have been dead since before you were born. If you fail, you tarnish their names as well as your own. You feel that weight in your chest, a tightness that rivals the tension of your bowstring. Every syllable you scream is a promise you have to keep. You've told the world who you are, and now the world is waiting to see if you're a liar. You grip the daikyu tighter, the textured grip pressing into your palm. As you finish your declaration, you see your opponent begin his own. The air is filled with these competing histories, a cacophony of names and titles that overlap and collide in the space between the lines. It's a verbal storm. You realize that this is why accuracy is often secondary. If you can overwhelm him with your presence, if you can dominate the soundscape of the battle, his aim will naturally falter. You are aiming at his mind first, his heart second. The arrow is just the physical manifestation of the mental victory you've already tried to seize. You settle into your stance, your voice still ringing in your own ears, feeling the power of the name flowing through your arms. You think about the crocodile dung, sunscreen from those ancient stories, how people would go to ridiculous lengths for a perceived advantage. Shouting your name is your version of that. It's a psychological layer of protection. It feels ancient, primal, and utterly necessary. You've built the wall of your identity. Now you just have to see if it's strong enough to stop an incoming shaft. The enemy has finished his shout. He's notched his arrow. The verbal duel is over. The silence that follows is the most dangerous silence of all. because it means the talking is done and the dying is about to begin. You lock eyes with him, your name still hanging in the air like smoke. As you stand there, your name still vibrating in the humid air, you enter a state of being that is far removed from the frantic panic of a common soldier. You are entering Zanshin. In the world of the samurai archer, Zanshin is often translated as lingering mind or remaining spirit, but to you, it feels like the world has suddenly slowed down to the pace of dripping honey. Every sensory input is magnified. You can hear the individual rustle of the silk cords on your shoulder guards. You can see the way the sunlight catches the microscopic imperfections in the bamboo of your bow. This isn't just focus, it's a form of mental armor. While your mouth was just busy screaming your lineage, your mind was building a fortress. You are training yourself to be unaffected by the very chaos you are helping to create. It is a psychological paradox. You must be loud enough to shake the earth, yet internally as still as a mountain lake. This mental state is your true protection. You know that the man across from you is likely trying to do the same, but you are betting that your spirit armor is thicker. By practicing this meditative awareness, you aren't just aiming at a target, you are aiming through it. You are visualizing the arrow already occupying the space where your opponent's heart is currently beating. Historians still argue whether the spiritual elements of Japanese archery, which we now associate with Zen Buddhism, were fully integrated into battlefield tactics during the Heian and Kamakura periods, or if those philosophical layers were added centuries later during the peaceful Edo period to keep bored warriors from fighting each other. But as you stand in the mud, you don't care about future academic debates. You only know that if you let your mind flicker for even a second, if you worry about the mortgage on your rice paddy or that weird mole on your left foot, you are a dead man. There is a quirky, fringe tidbit about this mental preparation that involves the stare. Some masters taught that you should look at your enemy as if they were a distant mountain present, but not distracting. If you focus too hard on the man himself, you become attached to him, and your movements become stiff and reactive. Instead, you are taught to maintain a soft gaze, taking in the entire battlefield at once. It's like trying to watch a 3D movie without the glasses. If you squint too hard, you miss the effect. You are essentially trying to be the most relaxed person at a party, where everyone is trying to kill each other. It's the ultimate calm blue ocean vibe, but with more lethal projectiles. You feel the Zanshin flowing through your limbs, stabilizing the tremor that naturally comes from holding a heavy draw. The screaming you did moments ago served a secondary purpose here. It emptied your lungs of stale air and forced a deep, diaphragmatic reset. By shouting your name, you literally exhaled your anxiety. Now, in the silence of the hold, you are a vacuum. This mental armor allows you to ignore the distractions that would ruin a lesser archer's aim. A horse screams nearby. A comrade falls with a sickening thud. A dragonfly lands on the tip of your bow. You acknowledge these things, but you do not invite them in for tea. You remain a detached observer of your own lethality. This state of mind also serves to intimidate. Imagine charging toward a man who is screaming like a demon 1 second, and then becomes as still as a statue the next. That sudden shift in energy is deeply unsettling. It suggests that you aren't just a soldier, but a professional, a man who has made peace with his own death, and is now simply waiting to facilitate yours. This is the samurai's mental armor in its most potent form. It's a psychological nozzle. No matter how much the enemy screams back at you, your lack of an emotional reaction becomes a weapon. You are showing him that his efforts to scare you have failed, which, naturally, scares the daylights out of him. You remember the crocodile dung logic from earlier, the idea that people will do anything for a perceived edge. In your case, the edge isn't a physical substance, it's the absence of clutter in your brain. You've stripped away the self until all that's left is the bow, the arrow, and the target. You aren't Tanaka the archer anymore. You are just the process of the shot. This is why you can stand there, exposed and shouting, without feeling the nakedness of the position. Your mental armor is more reliable than the lacquered iron on your chest because it doesn't have gaps at the armpits. It's a total body immersion in the present moment. Of course, maintaining this level of intense focus while someone is actively trying to turn you into a human pincushion is easier said than done. You've seen men who were brilliant in the practice dojo completely fall apart when the first real arrow whizzed past their ear. Their Zanshin shattered like cheap porcelain, and they reverted to panic mode, spraying arrows into the dirt and forgetting their own names. That's the difference between a practitioner and a warrior. You have to be able to hold that mental fortress even when the walls are literally being knocked down around you. You have to be the eye of the hurricane, the one spot of stillness in a world of screaming steel. You also realize that this mental state is what allows the shouting tactic to work in your favor. Because you are so mentally anchored, your shout is a tool, not a symptom of fear. It's a calculated release of energy, like the crack of a whip. When you bellow your lineage, it comes from your hera, your center, giving it a resonant, terrifying quality that a panicked scream could never match. You aren't just making noise, you are projecting your ki, your life force, across the distance. It's a sonic strike that precedes the physical one. You are literally trying to knock the wind out of him with your vocal cords. As you hold your breath, the world feels very small. It's just the distance between your thumb and his throat. You can see the rhythmic rising and falling of his chest. He's breathing too fast. He hasn't mastered his mental armor. He's leaking energy through his frantic movements and his darting eyes. You, however, are a closed circuit. You feel a strange sense of pity for him, but it's a cold, distant feeling that doesn't interfere with your aim. You are the mountain, and he is just the weather passing over you. The tension in the bow is at its peak. The wood is groaning, a low-frequency vibration that you feel in your very bones. Any second now, the lingering mind will transition into the release. You aren't deciding to fire. You are waiting for the moment when the shot fires itself. It's a subtle distinction, but it's the hallmark of the master. You are the passenger in your own body, watching as the training takes over. The psychological warfare is complete. You've shouted your name, you've donned your mental armor, and you've broken his spirit. Now, all that's left is to let the bamboo do what it was grown to do. While you stand there in your state of high-minded Zanshin, it's easy to get lost in the poetry of the duel. But let's be real for a second, being a samurai is a job. And like any job, it involves a staggering amount of paperwork and a constant need to prove your productivity to the boss. This is where the screaming of names takes a turn from the spiritual to the shockingly practical. You see, the bureaucracy of the battlefield is a very real thing in 12th century Japan. By shouting your name before you release that arrow, you are essentially clocking in. You are making sure that every witness on the field, including your own commander as scribes, knows exactly who is responsible for the body that is about to hit the dirt. If you kill a high-ranking enemy in total silence, did it even happen? Not as far as your paycheck is concerned. You are playing a high-stakes game of claim your task in a world where the rewards aren't just gold, but land, titles, and the right to keep your head attached to your neck. Historians still argue whether the entire ritual of the Nanori was actually a sophisticated tax and land grant management system disguised as a code of honor. Think about it. The shogunate needs to know who to reward after the war. If everyone is just a faceless soldier in a helmet, the post-war accounting is a nightmare. But if you scream, "I am Oda of the Northern Marshes," right before you take down a general, you've just filed a verbal patent on that kill. You are creating a vocal receipt. It's a bit like modern social media influencers tagging their location and sponsors. You're tagging your kill to ensure the algorithm, which, in this case, is a very grumpy lord with a ledger, gives you the credit you deserve. You realize that your voice is just as important as your aim because, without the shout, you're just a very skilled volunteer. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit that highlights just how bureaucratic this could get. After a battle, there was often a formal head viewing ceremony, where the heads of the defeated were presented to the lord. If you had shouted your name and been heard by reliable witnesses, the verification process was much smoother. However, if two different archers claimed the same head, it led to the 12th century equivalent of a legal dispute in small claims court. There are records of samurai getting into heated, multi-year arguments over who actually fired the lethal shot. Imagine having to call witnesses to testify that, "Yes, I heard Lord Hiroshi shout his lineage specifically 3 seconds before the arrow hit." It turns the battlefield into a giant, muddy courtroom where the court reporters are just the guys trying not to get stabbed. You look around at your fellow archers and realize that they aren't just your brothers in arms, they are your competitors. Every time one of them shouts their name louder than you, they are essentially trying to out-advertise you. It's a competitive marketplace for glory. This realization adds a layer of cynicism to the screaming. You aren't just trying to scare the enemy, you're trying to make sure your own side doesn't forget you exist. You feel the urge to make your next shout even more elaborate, perhaps mentioning that one time your uncle saved a very important monk from a burning temple. Every detail is a potential bonus on your end-of-year performance review. It's a bizarre mix of lethal violence and middle management anxiety. But this bureaucracy also has a darker side. Because the rewards for killing high-status enemies were so great, there was a massive incentive to aim high socially. You aren't going to waste your breath or your arrows on a foot soldier who doesn't even have a surname. You are looking for the guys with the fancy helmets and the long genealogies, Shouting your name is an invitation for someone of equal or greater status to respond. It's how you find the valuable targets. You're essentially filtering your inbox for high-priority emails. If a guy yells back and his family tree sounds like a list of legendary heroes, your eyes light up. That's a promotion. That's a new estate with a view of the mountains. That's a kill that will keep your children fed for 20 years. Of course, this means the battlefield is a chaotic mess of people trying to talk over each other. It must have sounded like a crowded fish market where everyone is also armed with lethal weapons. You've probably experienced that awkward moment where you start your introduction of doom at the exact same time as the guy next to you, and you both have to kind of awkwardly pause or just scream louder to compensate. It's the 1100s version of being on a Zoom call and saying no. You go ahead at the same time as someone else, except instead of a frozen screen, you're dealing with incoming fire. You learn to time your vocal receipts for the lulls in the noise to ensure maximum reach. This focus on credit also explains why accuracy might take a backseat to psychological impact. If you can make a spectacular, noisy shot that everyone sees and hears, it's worth more for your reputation than 3 quiet, efficient kills that no one noticed. The samurai archer is a creature of the spotlight. You want the highlight reel kill. You want the shot that people will talk about at the next tea ceremony. This is why you might take a riskier shot from a greater distance, while screaming at the top of your lungs. It's not just about winning the battle, it's about winning the narrative. You are the protagonist of your own story, and you need the audience to know it. You think back to the crocodile dung sunscreen, a ridiculous, but committed way to gain an advantage. Shouting for the sake of the ledger is your version of that. It's a bit absurd when you step back and look at it, but within the system, it's the only way to survive and thrive. You're a professional in a world that demands proof of your professionalism. You check the fletching on your arrow one last time. You want this one to be perfect. You want the flight to be steady and the impact to be unmistakable. When you release this, and when you shout that final syllable of your name, you are signing your work in blood. The enemy archer across from you seems to be doing the same. He's adjusting his grip, his eyes scanning your line, likely looking for a high-value target of his own. You realize with a start that to him, you are the promotion. You are the new rice field. It's a sobering thought. The bureaucracy of the battlefield makes everyone a commodity. You aren't just a person, you're a bounty. You feel a sudden spark of irritation. How dare he look at your illustrious family tree and see a paycheck? You decide that when you shoot, you're going to make sure he doesn't just die, he dies knowing he was outclassed by a superior brand. As you prepare to release, you find a strange comfort in the structure of it all. The rules, the names, the rewards, they provide a framework for the madness. It turns the terrifying reality of death into a manageable series of tasks and goals. You aren't just fighting for your life, you're processing a transaction. You take a deep breath, feeling the air settle in your lungs. The mental armor is back on, but the accountant in the back of your mind is still running the numbers. You are ready to make your mark, both on the enemy and on the official record of the day. Now, let's talk about the actual physics of this towering beast you're holding. Because trying to maintain your dignity while wrestling with a 7-foot piece of wood is its own kind of psychological battle. You feel the physics of the asymmetrical grip every time you shift your weight. Because the grip is located roughly 2/3 of the way down the bow, the upper limb is significantly longer than the lower one. This isn't just a design choice for horsemen. It creates a specific vibrational frequency. When you pull the string, the tension isn't distributed evenly. The longer upper limb has more give, while the shorter lower limb provides the foundational snap. It's like trying to balance a seesaw where a toddler is sitting on one end and a sumo wrestler is on the other. You have to use your core muscles, your hair, to stabilize the bow so it doesn't tilt forward, and turn your dignified warrior stance into a comedic pratfall. You struggle to balance this top-heavy weapon while maintaining the lung capacity for that war cry we talked about. It's a physiological nightmare to scream effectively. Your diaphragm needs to be relaxed and full of air, but to hold a 100-pound draw on an asymmetrical bow, your entire torso needs to be as rigid as a pillar. It's the ultimate patting your head while rubbing your stomach challenge, except the stakes involve being ventilated by an arrow. Historians still argue whether the asymmetrical shape was purely functional for cavalry, or if it evolved to compensate for the specific type of bamboo available in Japan, which tends to be more brittle at the base. Regardless of the why, the how is your current problem. You feel the bow wanting to kick in your hand, a torque that threatens to twist your wrist every time you inhale for a shout. There's a quirky fringe tidbit about the DAQ-US physics that your instructors likely hammered into you. The spring of the bow is so sensitive that the oils from your skin can actually affect its performance over a long day. If you grip the wood too tightly with a sweaty palm, you change the way the vibration travels through the laminate. Some archers would actually use a light dusting of ash or crushed pine resin to ensure their grip was a neutral point of contact. You are essentially holding a high-performance sports car that is made of grass and glue. If you don't respect the physics, the bow will bite you, sending the string slamming into your ear or your forearm. It is a weapon that demands you be both a brute and a physicist at the same time. You realize that your voice is actually a vital part of the physical stabilization. By timing your scream with the peak of the draw, you create a momentary internal pressure that helps lock your skeleton in place. It's the same reason powerlifters grunt when they hit a heavy squat. The shout isn't just for the enemy's ears, it's a biological brace for your spine. You are using the sound to hold yourself together against the crushing force of the Deikyu. If you were silent, your muscles might quiver under the strain, but the act of bellowing your name forces your body to commit to a single, explosive posture. You are literally shouting yourself into a state of physical alignment. The wind catches the upper limb of your bow, tugging at it like a sail. This is the downside of carrying a 7-foot monument. You have to compensate for the sail effect by leaning slightly into the breeze, all while keeping your eyes locked on the target. You feel like a tightrope walker in heavy armor. You've seen younger archers get caught by a sudden gust, their bows swaying wildly just as they release, sending their arrows off into the trees to murder some innocent squirrels. You, however, have learned to treat the bow as a sensor. You feel the wind through the wood, adjusting your grip by millimeters to keep the aim true. It's a delicate dance of tension and release, where the physics of the bow and the physics of the atmosphere are in a constant, silent argument. Interestingly, the asymmetry also affects the archer's paradox, the way an arrow must bend around the riser of the bow to fly straight. Because the Deikyu is so long and the grip is so low, the arrow undergoes a unique oscillation. It doesn't just fly, it snakes through the air. UV had to learn how to pick arrows that have the exact right spine or stiffness to match your specific bow's quirk. If the arrow is too stiff, it will veer left, too soft, and it might shatter upon release. You spend your evenings at camp hand-sorting your quiver, checking each shaft for the slightest warp. You're essentially a ballistics engineer in a world that hasn't invented the word ballistics yet. You also have to consider the recoil. When that string snaps forward, the energy that doesn't go into the arrow has to go somewhere. In a standard bow, it vibrates back into your arm. In the Deikyu, the asymmetrical limbs create a whip effect. The top limb snaps forward with more travel distance than the bottom, which can cause the bow to jump in your hand. This is why you practice the yuga-eri, allowing the bow to spin freely in your grip. It's a way of venting that excess energy safely. If you tried to hold it still, the vibration would eventually cause stress fractures in the wood end in your elbow. You are a conduit for the bow's power, not its master. As you hold the draw, you can feel the heat generating in your shoulder muscles. The physics of the weapon are demanding a high price for its lethality. You realize that the psychological part of the battle is actually a way to end the physical part faster. If you can scare the guy into running away with one good scream, you don't have to keep holding this 100-pound draw. Every second you spend in this posture is a second where your physical battery is draining. You are a human battery, and the Deikyu is a very inefficient light bulb. You need to finish this shot before your muscles reach their limit. You look at the enemy archer and wonder if he's feeling the same seesaw effect. You see him adjust his bow, his movements slightly jerky. He's fighting the physics. He's struggling to keep his top limb from swaying. You feel a surge of confidence. You've made peace with the asymmetry of your life and your weapon. You've learned to use the imbalance as a source of strength. You take a final, deep breath, feeling your diaphragm expand against your silk belt, creating that solid base of air. Your voice is ready, your muscles are locked, and the physics of the moment have reached a state of perfect, temporary equilibrium. The bow groans one last time, a sound of strained bamboo and ancient glue. You aren't just aiming an arrow, you are aiming a complex system of levers and pulleys made of organic matter. You are the operator of a biological machine. You feel the snap waiting to happen, the moment where the potential energy becomes kinetic. The physics of the shot are settled. All that's left is the will to let go. You prepare to release, knowing that the whip of the bow will follow your voice into the air, a twin strike of sound and steel. As you prepare to release the string, you lean into the core philosophy of your training. Intimidation isn't just a side effect of your presence, it is a ballistic variable. You realize that a trembling enemy is much easier to hit than a focused one. making raw accuracy almost secondary to the chaos you can sow in his mind. In the vacuum of a quiet dojo, you can hit a target the size of a cherry from 60 paces. But here, on a field where the mud is slick with more than just rainwater, accuracy is a relative term. If you can make your opponent's heart rate spike, his fine motor skills will evaporate, his fingers will fumble the notch, his eyes will lose their ability to track distance, his breath will become shallow and ragged. By screaming his name, you aren't just being loud, you are manually overriding his nervous system. You are aiming at his amygdala before you ever aim at his breastplate. Historians still argue whether the accuracy of the medieval samurai was actually quite poor compared to modern Olympic standards, or if the conditions of the battlefield simply demanded a different kind of skill. There's a school of thought that suggests the massive size of the daikyu and the heavy, wind-resistant arrows were never meant for surgical precision. Instead, they were area-effect psychological weapons. You don't need to hit a man in the eye if you can make 500 men believe that every arrow you fire is a heat-seeking missile powered by ancestral rage. You are selling the idea of lethality. If the enemy believes you can't miss, they will hide behind their shields, they will break formation, and they will lose the tactical initiative. You are effectively hacking their reality. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit about the psychological impact of the shot that involves the pheasant. Some ancient accounts suggest that seasoned warriors could actually smell the panic of their enemies across the gap, a sharp, metallic tang in the air that signaled a break in morale. While it sounds like something out of a supernatural ghost story, the physiological reality of extreme stress does change a person's chemistry. You look at the man across from you, searching for that telltale sign of a broken spirit. Is his bow tip dipping? Is he blinking too often? If you see a flicker of doubt, you don't even need to be perfectly accurate. You just need to put an arrow close enough to make him believe the next one is his destiny. It's the 12th century version of suppressive fire, but with much more screaming about your great-uncle's land deeds. You think about the sheer audacity of this approach. It's like playing a game of darts where you spend 5 minutes shouting at the dartboard before you throw. It seems ridiculous until you realize that in this game, the dartboard can throw back. If you can make the board flinch, you've won. You feel the tension in your own body, but you use your zanshin to keep it from becoming bad tension. Your tremors are productive. They are the vibration of a tightened spring. The enemy's tremors, however, are the vibrations of a collapsing house. You are using intimidation as a force multiplier. 1 arrow fired by a man who sounds like a god carries more weight than 10 arrows fired by a man who sounds like he is having a panic attack. This prioritization of intimidation also explains why your gear is so extra. Those giant horns on your helmet, the glaring face masks, the bright, clashing colors of your armor, they aren't for camouflage. They are for maximum visibility. You want to be the biggest, loudest, most terrifying thing on the horizon. Remember the crocodile dung from the earlier sections? This is the martial equivalent. It's a bold, slightly absurd commitment to an advantage that isn't purely physical. You are a peacock with a lethal sting. You are betting that the visual and auditory noise you create will act as a shield, disrupting the enemy's ability to focus on the task of actually killing you. You also realize that the screaming serves to mask the sounds of your own side. If your entire line is bellowing their lineages, the enemy can't hear the commands of their officers. You are creating a sonic fog. In this fog, accuracy becomes even less important than momentum. If the enemy can't hear the order to brace or volley, they are sitting ducks. You are part of a giant, yelling machine designed to drown out the enemy's capacity for reason. You feel the power of that collective noise rising behind you, a wall of sound that pushes you forward. It's intoxicating. It makes you feel like you could shoot through a stone wall if you just screamed hard enough. But you have to be careful. If you focus too much on the show and completely neglect the shot, you become a laughingstock or a corpse. There is a fine line between psychological warrior and noisy target. You've seen archers who got so caught up in their own performance that they forgot to check their footing, tripped on a root, and fired their arrow into their own horse's ear. That's the fail state of this tactic. You have to maintain just enough boring technical accuracy to back up the exciting intimidation. You are a professional, after all. The shout gets you the attention. The arrow keeps it. You look at your arrow's head, the yanagaba, or willow leaf point. It's designed to slice through silk and flesh with minimal resistance. You don't need to hit him in a sweet spot if the psychological pressure has already forced him to drop his guard. An arrow in the thigh is just as effective as an arrow in the chest if the man receiving it is too terrified to keep fighting. You are aiming for the system failure of the individual. You want him to feel like the entire world is closing in on him, and you are the pinpoint of that pressure. As you hold the draw, you feel a strange sense of empathy for the man you're about to kill. You know exactly what he is feeling because you've had to train your entire life to not feel it. You are the product of a brutal psychological conditioning that turned your fear into a tool. He is just a man who is currently realizing he's out of his depth. The gap between your training and his fear is the space where the battle is truly won. You aren't just an archer, you are a psychological surgeon, and your scalpel is a 3-foot shaft of bamboo and a very loud voice. The moment is ripe. The ballistic variable of his fear has reached its peak. He's frozen, eyes wide, paralyzed by the sheer volume of your existence. You can see the sweat on his lip from 50 yards away. You don't need to be a legendary marksman today. You just need to be the person who delivers the final, inevitable blow to a man who has already given up. You prepare to let the string slip from your thumb, knowing that the sound of the release will be the last thing he ever hears clearly. As you maintain your draw, the weight of the Deku pulling against your spine, you become acutely aware of the fashion of fear you are currently wearing. This isn't just clothing, it's a psychological exoskeleton. You are encased in Oi Oroi, the great armor, a complex assembly of leather and iron scales held together by miles of silk cord. But the real masterpiece of intimidation sits right on your head, the Kabuto helmet, complete with a menpo, a lacquered iron faceplate. You realize that your voice, which you've been using to broadcast your lineage, is being physically transformed by this mask. The menpo usually features a snarling expression, a permanent, frozen grimace with a bristling mustache made of horse hair. It doesn't just hide your human fear, it replaces it with a demonic visage. When you scream your name, the sound bounces around the iron interior of the mask before exiting through the mouth opening, giving your voice a metallic, hollow, and terrifyingly amplified resonance. You aren't just a man yelling anymore. You are a localized thunderstorm with an iron face. The fashion of fear is designed to strip away your humanity in the eyes of the enemy. Historians still argue whether the menpo was primarily a protective piece of gear to stop stray arrows from taking off your nose, or if its primary function was purely theatrical. Looking through the narrow eye slits, you feel the psychological shift. You are seeing the world through the eyes of a monster. This mask acts as a filter, protecting your own psyche from the gruesome reality of what you are about to do, while projecting a soul-crushing image of invincibility to those in front of you. It is the 12th century equivalent of wearing a dark visor or a skull mask in a modern tactical setting. It makes you a blank slate of aggression. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit about these helmets that would make a modern fashionista cringe. Many samurai would burn incense inside their kabuto before a battle. This wasn't just to smell nice while they were sweating through their silk liners. It was a morbidly practical preparation. If you were decapitated, you wanted your head to smell pleasant for the victor who would later handle it. During the head viewing ceremony, it was a final, graceful thank you to the man who killed you. You catch a whiff of sandalwood or agarwood drifting up from under your chin strap, a reminder that in this world, beauty and brutality are roommates. It is a bit like putting on expensive cologne before going into a mosh pit. It is absurd, yet it speaks to a very specific kind of high-stakes vanity. You feel the extra weight of the fukigaishi, the large wing flaps on the sides of your helmet. They are designed to catch arrows that might otherwise hit your neck, but they also act like blinkers on a horse. They keep your focus strictly forward, on the man whose name you just finished screaming. You realize that your entire outfit is a sensory deprivation chamber for you, and a sensory overload machine for everyone else. The bright colors of your silk lacing, perhaps a vivid falling cherry blossom pattern, symbolize the fleeting nature of life. You are literally wearing a poem about death while you try to deliver it. It is a multi-layered psychological assault that tells the enemy you have the leisure to be artistic while you are being lethal. The menpo also serves a very practical vocal purpose. By providing a solid surface for your jaw to press against, it helps you project your voice further, acting like a primitive megaphone. When you let out a kiai, that concentrated spirit yell, the iron mask focuses the sound waves into a directed beam of noise. You've noticed that when you scream while wearing the mask, the horses on the enemy line seem to react more violently. It's a sound that doesn't belong in nature. It's the sound of a human voice being forced through a furnace of iron and lacquer. You feel like a sorcerer who has summoned a mechanical demon to do his shouting for him. You think back to the crocodile dung sunscreen logic. If that was about physical protection, this armor is about soul protection. By hiding your face, you prevent the enemy from making eye contact and seeing you as a human being with a family and a favorite type of noodle. You become an object, a weapon, and it is much harder for an opponent to shoot a demon than it is to shoot a person. You watch the enemy archer's eyes. He is staring at your iron grimace, unable to see your eyes or your expression. He can't tell if you're angry, bored, or terrified. That lack of information is a void that his own imagination will fill with fear. He's projecting his own nightmares onto your lacquered face. However, there is a catch. This fashion of fear is incredibly heavy and hot. You are currently wearing about 60 pounds of gear, and the humidity is making the silk cords expand and the leather soften. You feel like a steamed clam in a very expensive shell. If you don't end this engagement soon, the intimidation factor will be replaced by the heat stroke factor. You've seen warriors literally pass out from the weight and heat of their own grandeur. It's the ultimate trade-off. You look like a god, but you feel like you're being slow-cooked in a metal box. You have to keep the psychological pressure high because you simply don't have the stamina for a long, quiet fight. You adjust your grip, the leather of your glove squeaking against the lacquer of the bow. You realize that the fashion extends to the deku itself. It's often wrapped in decorative rattan or finished in deep red or black urashi lacquer. It's a coordinated look. You are a walking brand of death. This cohesion of equipment sends a message of discipline. If a man has the time to make sure his bow matches his helmet, he probably has the time to practice his aim until it's perfect. It's a visual shorthand for I am a professional, and I am very good at this. You are using the enemy's own assumptions about status and wealth against them. But the most important part of the armor isn't the iron or the silk. It's the way it makes you feel. When you put on the mask, you step out of your everyday life. You aren't the man who argues with his wife about the grocery budget. You are the archer of the northern marshes. The fashion gives you the permission to be the terrifying person the script requires. It's a costume that grants you power. You feel the growl building in your throat again, a resonance that the menpo is eager to catch and throw back at the world. You look down at the muddy ground, then back at your target. The iron mustache on your mask is probably the last thing he'll see clearly. You feel a strange sense of satisfaction. You've put on the show, you've worn the costume, and you've played the part. Now, the fashion of fear is about to transition into the reality of the shot. You take a final breath, the cool air entering the menpo through the nose holes, and you feel the fashion of fear lock into place. You are the demon, you are the storm, and the storm is about to break. You feel the powerful rhythm of your horse beneath you, a sturdy, thick-necked beast that smells of salt and old hay. This isn't the graceful, thin-legged creature of a modern racetrack. This is a kiso horse, a low-slung engine of muscle designed to navigate the uneven, muddy terrain of the Japanese countryside. As you gallop toward the enemy line, you realize that your vocal stamina is just as important as your physical balance. To shoot a deku from the saddle, you have to stand in your stirrups, a technique called yabasum. You are essentially hovering above the horse, using your knees as shock absorbers to keep your upper body as steady as a mountain. And while you're doing this, you're still screaming. You are trying to notch an arrow, maintain your seat, and bellow your lineage all at the same time. Your voice becomes your third anchor. It's a rhythmic tool. By shouting in time with the horse's hooves, you find a cadence that keeps your heart from leaping out of your chest. Historians still argue whether the standing posture in the stirrups was a universal practice or if it was reserved for the most elite marksmen who could afford the specialized, heavy saddles required to pull it off. You, however, know the reality. If you don't stand, the horse's gait will jar your aim and likely send your arrow into the clouds. You are a biological gyroscope. You feel the wind whipping past your kabuto, threatening to catch the wide brims of your helmet and snap your neck back. You have to scream into the wind, forcing the air out of your lungs with such violence that the sound can be heard over the thundering of hoofs. It's a feat of vocal stamina that would leave a common foot soldier breathless in seconds. You are essentially a one-man cavalry choir, and the song you're singing is a promise of violence. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit about these war horses that many people overlook. Because the samurai were so loud and the battles were so chaotic, some horses were actually trained using noise conditioning. Grooms would bang drums and scream nearby while the horses ate, so that on the battlefield, the sound of a man yelling his ancestral history wouldn't cause the animal to bolt. If your horse isn't conditioned, your psychological warfare might backfire, leaving you screaming your name while your mount tries to head for the nearest quiet forest. You feel the steady, calm focus of your horse and realize that you are a partnership of two very loud, very focused creatures. It's a bit like trying to drive a car that only moves if you race shouting at the top of your lungs. The act of notching an arrow while at a full gallop is where the accidental nature of the screaming reveals its genius. When you scream, you are forced to engage your core muscles, your hera. This engagement provides a momentary rigidity to your spine that allows your hands to remain fluid and precise. You reach for the arrow, your fingers finding the notch by touch alone. Because your eyes are locked on the enemy, you aren't looking at your hands, you're looking at the gap in the opponent's formation. You scream a challenge, and the vibration of the shout helps you feel the bow. You are using your voice to drown out the internal monologue of fear that tells you, you're about to fall and be trampled. You remember the crocodile dung logic, the commitment to an extreme, slightly absurd advantage. Training your horse to ignore your screams is exactly that. It's an invisible layer of preparation. You look ahead and see the enemy's archers beginning to fire. The sky is suddenly traced with the dark lines of incoming shafts. Now, your screaming serves a new purpose. It's a psychological shield. By maintaining your volume, you are telling the enemy that you aren't intimidated by their volleys. You are galloping through a rain of death, and you're still talking about your great-grandfather's bravery. It makes you look insane. And in war, an insane man is a terrifying man. Interestingly, some scholars suggest that the kai, the spirit yell, was actually used to regulate the horse's breathing as well. A horse is a sensitive creature. If it feels its rider's breath become shallow and panicked, it will mimic that anxiety by letting out a long, sustained roar as you draw the bow. You are signaling to the horse that everything is under control. You are the conductor of this chaotic orchestra. You feel the horse's muscles bunching and releasing beneath you, perfectly in sync with your own movements. It's a high-speed, high-stakes dance where the music is your own voice and the percussion is the sound of the hooves in the dirt. But the physical toll is massive. Your throat feels like it's been scraped with sandpaper, and the salt from your sweat is stinging the corners of your mouth. You've been screaming for 20 minutes, and you still haven't reached the primary engagement. This is where vocal stamina becomes a literal lifesaver. If your voice cracks or fails, you lose that third anchor. You lose the ability to project that image of divine wrath. You've seen warriors lose their voices mid-charge, and the sudden silence makes them look vulnerable, like a play that's been stopped because the lead actor forgot his lines. You dig deep, finding a reserve of air you didn't know you had, and push out one more bellowing declaration of your name. You notice the enemy's horses are starting to fret. The combination of the whizzing arrows, the bright flapping banners, and your relentless screaming is doing its work. One horse on the left flank rears up, throwing its rider into the mud. That's one less bow pointed at you. You realize that your voice is a weapon of mass distraction. You don't even have to hit everyone. You just have to make them so uncomfortable that they can't do their own jobs. You are a mobile noise pollution unit, and your emissions are breaking the enemy's concentration. As you draw the deku back, the horse hits a smooth patch of ground. This is your window. You feel the familiar tension, the seesaw of the asymmetrical bow, and the heat of the horse's body through your inner thighs. You are at the peak of your gallop, the peak of your draw, and the peak of your scream. Everything is aligned. The vocal stamina has held out. The horse has stayed true, and the enemy is right where you want him. You are no longer just a rider or an archer. You are a projectile in your own right, a screaming bolt of iron and silk hurtling toward the target. The release is coming. You can feel it in the way your thumb glove is slipping just a fraction. You give one final, bone-shaking yell, not a name this time, just a raw, guttural expression of your ki. It's the sound of the spirit yell taking over. The arrow is no longer an object in your hand. It's an extension of your voice. You let go, and for a split second, the world is silent as the arrow begins its flight, leaving you and your horse to thunder onward through the dust. As the dust from your initial charge begins to settle, the battle enters a phase that feels less like a military maneuver and more like a high-stakes debate at a very violent town hall. This is the call-out culture of 12th century Japan, a verbal duel where insults are traded like physical blows before a single string is plucked. You find yourself sitting atop your horse, just out of range of the common foot soldiers, locking eyes with a man who looks just as expensive and dangerous as you do. This isn't a moment for a generic war cry. This is a moment for surgical, personalized disrespect. You begin to critique his lineage, his choice of horse, and the quality of his armor's lacing. You are using your voice to bait him into an emotional mistake. In this culture, your reputation is your most valuable asset, and by attacking it publicly, you are forcing him to choose between his safety and his honor. To a modern observer, this might look like two kids on a playground arguing over who has the better sneakers, but the implications here are lethal. Historians still argue whether these verbal exchanges were meant to genuinely delay the fighting, to allow for negotiations, or if they were a deliberate tactic to identify the enemy's leaders through their responses. You realize that by engaging in this call-out, you are performing a vital intelligence-gathering mission. Every time he shouts back an insult, he reveals a bit more about his identity, his rank, and his temperament. If he loses his cool and starts screaming incoherently, you know you've already won the psychological round. You're looking for that crack in his composure, the moment where his mental armor slips, and he becomes just another angry man in a hat. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit about these verbal duels that illustrates the bizarre etiquette of the era. There are accounts of samurai pausing a battle to literally argue about the poetic quality of an opponent's insult. If you delivered a particularly clever or classically inspired burn, your opponent might actually acknowledge it with a nod before trying to put an arrow through your face. It's a surreal blend of literary criticism and homicide. You find yourself trying to remember a specific line from the Manyoshu poetry anthology to weave into your next taunt, hoping that the sheer intellectual dominance will make his hand shake when he finally reaches for his quiver. It's the ultimate flex, showing him that you are so comfortable in the face of death that you have time for wordplay. You watch as your opponent gathers his breath for a retort. He shouts about a supposed cowardice in your family's history during the previous winter's campaign. It's a lie, but a well-constructed one. You feel the heat of anger rising in your neck, and you realize you've just been baited. This is the danger of the call-out culture. It's a double-edged sword that can cut the user as easily as the target. You have to use your Zanshin to push that anger down, turning it into a cold, focused energy. If you let your emotions dictate your shot, the arrow will fly wide. You respond with a calm, biting remark about the state of his lord's finances, a jab designed to hit his professional pride. You are two masters of the psychological jab, circling each other in a ring made of mud and tradition. The call-out also serves to establish a contract of combat. By singling him out and engaging in this verbal sparring, you are telling everyone else on the field, this guy is mine. It's a way to claim the most prestigious duel of the day. You don't want some random Ashigaru with a spear to poke him while you're mid-sentence. You want the world to see you defeat him in a fair, or at least a highly public, exchange. You're essentially marking your territory with sound. It creates a pocket of personal battle within the larger impersonal war. You see the soldiers around you slowing down, almost as if they're waiting for the punchline. The power of the voice is so great that it can actually stall the momentum of 1,000 men. Interestingly, this vocal duel is a way to test the air of the battlefield. You are listening for the conviction in his voice. If he sounds hollow, or if his voice cracks when he mentions his father's name, you know he's vulnerable. You are like a doctor tapping on a chest, listening for the resonance of health. A man who truly believes in his cause and his lineage has a voice that sounds like a bell. A man who is afraid sounds like a drum muffled by wet cloth. You are analyzing his vocal signature to determine exactly how much effort you need to put into the physical kill. You're essentially doing a pre-combat vibe check with lethal consequences. You remember the crocodile dung sunscreen, that commitment to a bizarre advantage. In this case, your advantage is your wit and your memory. Being a great archer isn't enough. You have to be a great orator, too. You've spent years memorizing genealogies and epic poems for this exact reason. You look at him and deliver a final, devastating insult, questioning the very legitimacy of his clan's title. The reaction is instantaneous. He stops talking. His face turns a deep shade of crimson, and he reaches for his bow with a jerky, uncoordinated movement. You've done it. You've broken his rhythm. By winning the call-out, you've forced him to play your game. But you have to stay sharp. Now that the talking is over, he's going to try to erase the insult with an arrow. You feel the shift in the atmosphere as the call-out culture transitions back into combat culture. The words are still hanging in the air, but the bowstrings are being drawn. You take a deep breath, feeling the satisfaction of a well-delivered line. You realize that in this world, a sharp tongue often makes the arrow fly straighter. You've set the stage, you've antagonized the lead actor, and now you're ready for the final act. You look at your Deikyu, the lacquer shimmering in the afternoon light. It's time to let the wood do the talking. You notch your arrow, your movements deliberate and slow, a stark contrast to his frantic haste. You've successfully made him the aggressor, which means he's the one who will make the first mistake. You find a strange kind of humor in it, all the way a few well-placed sentences can be more effective than a 100-yard dash. You are a poet of the battlefield, and your last verse is about to be delivered at 200 feet per second. The silence that follows the insults is heavy, pregnant with the promise of the shot. You see him pull back his string, his shoulders tight and his breath shallow. He's aiming for your throat, but he's seeing the insult you just threw at him instead of the target. You, on the other hand, are as calm as a stone. You have nothing left to say. The verbal duel is finished. The winner has been declared in the mind, and now it's just a matter of physics. You prepare your release, a slight smile hidden behind your iron mask. As the verbal insults fade and you settle back into your shooting stance, you find yourself tapping into a deeper, more esoteric layer of your training, the intersection of Zen philosophy and the raw physics of loudness. You've been taught that your shout isn't just an announcement of your identity, but a spiritual weapon in its own right. This is the concept of the kiai, but practiced with a focus on spirit-paralyzing sound. You aren't just making noise. You are trying to project your internal energy or ki outward with such force that it physically stuns your opponent. You've heard masters speak of archers whose shout was so pure and so resonant that the enemy's heart literally skipped a beat, causing them to drop their bow in a state of sudden, inexplicable terror. It's the idea that a sound can be a physical blow, a sonic wall that stops a charging man in his tracks. Historians still argue whether the spiritual integration of Zen into archery was a genuine medieval development or if it was a retrospective branding by later generations, trying to make a bloody trade look more enlightened. However, as you stand in the muck of the battlefield, the Zen of loudness feels very real. You aren't trying to be loud. You are simply allowing the sound to erupt from your center. You've learned that the most terrifying shout isn't the highest or the shrillest, but the one that carries the most weight. It's a low, resonant boom that seems to come from the earth itself. You are aiming to harmonize your voice with the vibration of your bowstring, creating a singular, overwhelming frequency of aggression that shatters the enemy's concentration. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit about this spiritual vocalization that borders on the supernatural. Some old scrolls describe a technique called the lioness roar, which allegedly could burst the eardrums of anyone standing too close. While likely a bit of classic wartime hyperbole, you've definitely felt the physical push of a collective shout from a disciplined unit. It's like a wave of heat. You realize that your voice is a tool for mental disruption. If you can vibrate the air around your opponent with enough intensity, you disrupt the delicate fluid in their inner ear, affecting their balance and their sense of depth. You are literally using your vocal cords to perform a denial of service attack on their brain. You look at the man across from you and see him trying to center himself. He's closing his eyes for a split second, likely trying to find his own stillness. You decide to deny him that luxury. You let out a short, sharp bark of a laugh, a sound that is deliberately out of sync with the expected ritual. It's a Zen slap delivered through the air. It breaks his rhythm, forcing him to react to you instead of following his own internal script. This is the art of being spiritually loud. You are taking up all the available bandwidth in the environment. Between your towering bow, your iron mask, and your unpredictable vocalizations, you have left no room for him to think. He is drowning in your presence. The Zen of loudness also helps you manage your own pain. Your shoulder is screaming from the weight of the draw, and the cold mud is seeping into your boots. By focusing on the spirit yell, you move your awareness away from your physical discomfort and into the sound itself. You become the noise. There is a famous saying among your mentors: the arrow is the word, the bow is the breath, and the hit is the truth. You are currently mid-sentence, and you want that sentence to be a shout that echoes in the afterlife. You feel a strange sense of liberation. In this high-decibel environment, you don't have to worry about the future or the past. There is only the vibration of the present moment. You remember the crocodile dung sunscreen analogy. If that was about vanity, this Zen shouting is about the ultimate internal advantage. It's a layer of psychological conditioning that makes you feel invincible. You believe that your shout can literally knock an arrow out of the air, and in battle, believing you are a god is often the first step toward acting like one. You see the enemy archer's thumb tremble. He's losing the spiritual battle. He's focusing on the nefitting instead of the being. You, however, have surrendered to the noise. You are a vessel for the roar of your ancestors. Interestingly, this spiritual loudness also serves a communal purpose. Your shout provides a north star for your comrades. In the blinding smoke and dust of a real engagement, your voice tells your allies exactly where you are and that you are still fighting. It's a spiritual lighthouse. By being loud, you are radiating confidence to your left and right, reinforcing the mental armor of your entire squad. You are a one-man morale booster, fueled by the belief that your vocal cords are as lethal as your broadheads. You feel the connection to the men around you, a web of sound that binds you into a single, screaming organism. But you have to be careful not to let the spirit yell become an ego yell, True Zen loudness is supposed to be selfless and natural byproduct of perfect action. If you start thinking about how cool you sound, you've lost the Zen and you're just a guy making a racket. You have to maintain that lingering mind even while you are bellowing like a dragon. You check your breath, ensuring it's coming from your belly and not your throat. A throat scream is weak and will ruin your voice in minutes. A belly scream is eternal. You are drawing on the breath of the universe to power your intimidation. You look at the target again. He's no longer a man. He's just a point in space that needs to be filled by your energy. The Zen of loudness has simplified the world for you. The complexity of the genealogy, the weight of the armor, and the physics of the bow have all been distilled into a single, vibrating intent. You feel the string digging into your thumb glove, a sharp reminder that the physical world still exists, but it feels distant, like a dream you're about to wake up from. The release is imminent. You can feel the snap of the universe waiting to happen. You prepare to let the string go, not as a choice, but as the inevitable conclusion of your shout. The sound and the arrow will depart together, a dual strike of spirit and steel. You are the roar, you are the bow, and you are the silence that follows. The ritualized, poetic world of the Nanori and the Zen of loudness suddenly hits a wall of cold, hard reality as the 13th century brings a new player to the field, the Mongols. You stand on the shores of Kyushu, and for the first time in your life, you are screaming your name into a vacuum. You step forward, heart racing, and begin the formal declaration of your lineage, expecting the usual respectful pause or a countershout of equal weight. Instead, you are met with a rain of exploding thunder crash bombs and a wall of silent, disciplined archers who don't care about your grandfather's land deeds or the poetic nuances of your threat. This is the Mongol shock. You realize that the psychological tactics you've spent a lifetime perfecting are based on a shared cultural contract and the Mongols never signed it. To them, your screaming isn't terrifying. It is a convenient way to locate the most important person on the field, so they can shoot you first. Historians still argue whether the Japanese quickly abandoned the Nanori during the Mongol invasions or if they stubbornly clung to it out of a sense of religious duty. Even as it got them killed, you feel the crushing weight of this tactical disconnect. You are like a Shakespearean actor who has wandered into a modern-day street fight. Your performance requires an audience that understands the language of honor, but the enemy in front of you speaks only the language of total war. They move in tight, coordinated groups, their short composite bows whizzing in a rhythmic, impersonal cadence. There is no individual glory here, only the efficiency of the swarm. You realize that your voice, once your greatest psychological shield, has suddenly become a liability. It's the 13th century version of bringing a megaphone to a sniper duel. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit about this culture clash. Initial accounts from Japanese survivors mention a profound sense of rudeness from the Mongols. They were genuinely offended that the enemy wouldn't stop to listen to their introductions. It's a bit like someone hanging up on you during a very important dramatic monologue. You feel a surge of righteous indignation. How can they fight without acknowledging who you are? But that indignation is quickly replaced by a survival instinct. You see the thunder crash bomb ceramic pots filled with gunpowder hurled from catapults. The noise they make is louder than any human kiai, a deafening roar that sends your well-conditioned warhorse into a genuine, unmanageable panic. The Mongols have brought their own Zen of loudness, and it's powered by chemistry, not spirit. You look at your Deikyu. It feels too big, too slow, and too loud for this new kind of chaos. The Mongol shock forces you to adapt your psychological warfare on the fly. You stop shouting your name and start using your voice for raw, guttural coordination with your own men. The theater is over. The gritty reboot of Japanese warfare has begun. You realize that intimidation now has to be purely physical. If they don't care about your name, you have to make them care about your arrows. You find yourself pulling the string faster, skipping the meditative pauses of Zanshin for the frantic necessity of not dying. You are witnessing the end of an era where the individual superstar warrior is being challenged by the industrialization of the battlefield. Interestingly, this shock actually refined the samurai's resolve. Once you realized the Mongols weren't playing by the rules, your intimidation tactics became more focused on no-quarter aggression. If your name didn't scare them, your lack of mercy would. You see your fellow archers abandoning the high-pitched ritual screams for a deeper, more menacing collective roar. You are learning to use your voice not as a calling card, but as a way to maintain group morale against an overwhelming, alien force. The psychological intimidation is no longer about ego, it's about survival. You are part of a cornered animal's defense, and that is a much scarier sound than any genealogy. You remember the crocodile dung sunscreen, the commitment to a perceived edge. In this context, your edge is the realization that your tradition has to evolve or be extinguished. You watch as a group of samurai abandon their horses to charge the Mongol boats on foot, screaming not for glory, but for blood. The psychological game has shifted from who am I to what will I do to you. It's a darker, more primal version of the battlefield. You feel the transition in your own throat. The refined, poetic insults are gone, replaced by a raw, animalistic kiai that needs no translation. You are speaking the universal language of the predator now. The Mongols use drums and gongs to signal their movements, a rhythmic, mechanical sound that contrasts with the organic, human noise of your side. It's a battle of man versus machine. Centuries before the Industrial Revolution, you find that by shouting over their drums, you can reclaim a sense of agency. You are telling yourself that your spirit is louder than their iron gongs. It's a desperate, defiant act of psychological self-preservation. You aren't just trying to scare the Mongols. You're trying to keep your own heart from freezing over in the face of their efficiency. You look at the enemy line again. They are reloading with a speed that defies your training. They don't have the physics of the asymmetrical grip to worry about. Their small bows are built for volume. You realize that to survive the Mongol shock, you have to become more like them, less ritual, more results. But you can't entirely let go of who you are. You notch your arrow and, for the first time today, you don't scream your name. You scream a command. You've moved from being a soloist to being a conductor. The intimidation is now in the unity of your volley. The atmosphere on the beach is a chaotic blend of smoke, salt spray, and the scent of gunpowder. The psychological weight of the unknown is heavy. These men from the steppes are a riddle you haven't solved yet. But as you release your arrow, you feel a spark of the old confidence. An arrow is still an arrow, and a man is still a man. Whether they know your name or not, they will know your sting. You've survived the initial shock, and now you're ready to show them that the screaming archer can be just as deadly when he is fighting for his life instead of his land grants. As the sun begins to set over the blood-stained waves, the sound of the battle changes again. The Mongol drums fade, and the Japanese cries grow more disciplined. You've learned a hard lesson in the limits of theater. The Mongol shock didn't destroy the samurai, it tempered them. You take a deep breath, your lungs burning from the smoke, and prepare for the next wave. You might not be shouting about your great-grandfather anymore, but the sound you're making now is much, much more dangerous. The dust of the Mongol invasion eventually settled, but it left the soul of the Japanese warrior forever changed. You have returned to the training grounds, but the way you breathe, the way you stand, and especially the way you yell has undergone a profound evolution. You are no longer just making noise. You are mastering the kai, the spirit yell, as a disciplined science of the diaphragm. You've learned that a scattered, panicked scream is a leak in your armor, a waste of precious energy. Now, you focus on the lower dantian, the point just below your navel, as the source of your power. When you shout, you aren't just using your throat, you are compressing your entire torso into a single, explosive point of pressure. You've discovered how to project this sound so that a single archer, standing in the middle of a silent field, can sound like an entire army. It is a vocal illusion, a way to make the enemy feel surrounded by ghosts. Historians still argue whether the formalization of the kiai was a reaction to the silence of the Mongols or if it was a natural progression of martial arts. As they became more introspective and spiritual, you, however, feel the physical reality of it in every fiber of your being. By mastering the kiai, you've learned to vocalize your intention. It's no longer just about the words of the nanori. It's about the raw frequency of the sound. You can now produce a yell that is so sharp it cuts through the din of battle like a knife, or one so low and guttural that it makes the enemy's own armor vibrate against their skin. You are learning to play the instrument of the human body to achieve maximum psychological disruption. It's the 14th century version of psychological acoustics, turning your own breath into a weapon of mass confusion. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit about this evolution. Some schools of archery began to categorize the kiai into different flavors. There was the victory yell, the challenge yell, and even the healing yell meant to steady the nerves of wounded comrades. You spend hours practicing these different tones, realizing that the spirit yell is a language of its own. You've seen masters who could let out a kiai that was almost silent, a vibration of the air that felt more like a sudden drop in temperature than a sound. It's a bit like a modern subwoofer that you can feel in your teeth. Before you hear it with your ears, you are becoming a connoisseur of intimidation, moving beyond the brute force of a scream into the precision of a sonic strike. You find that this mastery of the kiai has a strange effect on your archery. Because you are so focused on the spirit of the sound, the act of releasing the arrow becomes secondary. The arrow becomes a byproduct of the yell. You reach the peak of your draw, your lungs filled with that compressed, heavy air, and as you let out the roar, the string simply slips away. It's a perfect synchronization of body and voice. You realize that your voice is the trigger for the bow. This level of coordination makes you faster and more decisive. You aren't choosing to shoot. You are allowing the shot to happen at the exact moment your spirit reaches its peak. It makes you a much more fluid, and therefore more terrifying, opponent. Interestingly, this evolution of the kiai also served a very practical purpose for the evolving battlefield tactics. As armies grew larger and more complex, the individual shout-out became less about ego and more about signal. You've learned to use specific vocal signatures to communicate with your unit through the chaos. A certain pitch of the yell might mean advance, while a sustained, low roar might mean hold the line. You are a human radio, using the spirit yell to bypass the noise of the enemy. The psychological effect on the opponent is profound. They hear a wall of sound that is perfectly coordinated, a symphony of aggression that suggests a single, unified mind is controlling the entire field. You remember the crocodile dung logic, the commitment to an extreme advantage. In this case, the advantage is your internal pressure. By training your diaphragm to handle the spirit yell, you've also increased your physical stamina. You can hold the heavy draw of the Deku for twice as long as you used to, because your air brace is stronger. You look at the younger archers, who are still screaming from their chests, and you see how quickly they tire. Their shoulders are hunched, their faces are red. You, on the other hand, are calm. Your shout comes from a place of stillness. You are the eye of the storm, and your voice is the thunder that follows the lightning of your arrow. But you have to be careful not to let the spirit yell become a performance for its own sake. There is a danger in getting lost in the coolness of the sound. If you focus too much on the roar and not enough on the target, you're just a very loud gardener. You have to maintain that lingering mind the zanshin even as the sound is erupting from your body. You've seen men who could shout the roof off a temple, but couldn't hit a barn door from 10 paces. That's the vocalist's trap. You must remain a warrior first, a singer of war second. The kiai is the fuel, but the arrow is the destination. You look at your quiver, noticing how the arrows seem to hum in sympathy with your voice. The physics of the moment are becoming more intuitive. You understand that sound is just another form of energy, just like the tension in the bow or the speed of the horse. You are learning to aim your voice just as you aim your arrow. If you can focus your shout on a specific point in the enemy's line, you can create a hole in their morale. You've seen it happen. You let out a concentrated burst of sound, and the man you ray aiming at flinches just enough for your arrow to find the gap in his armor. It's a dual-pronged attack that the mind has no defense against. As you prepare for your next shot, you feel the familiar ball of fire in your lower belly. The kiai is ready. You aren't just an archer anymore. You are a force of nature. You take a deep breath, feeling the air fill your lungs from the bottom up. You are ready to project your identity, your lineage, and your sheer, unadulterated will into the air. The evolution of the kiai has turned you into a master of the invisible battlefield. Where the loudest spirit is the one that survives, the world feels small again. It's just you, the bow, and the sound waiting to be born. You feel a sense of profound connection to the warriors who came before you, and those who will come after. The spirit yell is the thread that binds you all together. You prepare to release, knowing that the sound you make today will echo far beyond the borders of this field. You are the roar of the samurai, and the world is about to hear you. As the battle stretches into its second hour, you feel the physical toll mounting, but your focus shifts to the depleting weight on your back, the logistics of the quiver. Each arrow in your yabira is a handcrafted masterpiece, and in this world of psychological warfare, you realize that each one is a precious vessel for a specific message. You don't have an infinite supply of ammunition. You carry perhaps 20 to 25 shafts. This scarcity dictates your strategy. You can't just spray and pray like a frantic conscript. Every time you notch an arrow, you are making a calculated investment. If you scream a man's name and then fire a low-quality, warped arrow that sails into the mud, you haven't just missed a target, you've wasted a piece of your reputation. You find yourself touching the fletching of each arrow by feel, identifying the whistlers, the armor piercers, and the signal makers as if they were individual soldiers under your command. Historians still argue whether the limited capacity of the samurai quiver was a tactical choice to encourage precision or simply a physical constraint of fighting on horseback. You, however, Feel the weight of every empty slot. You are constantly performing mental math. How many names can I shout before I am out of words? How many high-value targets are left on that ridge? You realize that your quiver is a countdown clock. This logistical pressure actually sharpens your intimidation tactics because you have so few shots. You make each one a theatrical event. You use the scarcity to your advantage. The enemy knows that if a samurai of your rank is aiming at them, it's not a random occurrence. It's a death sentence that you've specifically curated for them. You are the high-end boutique of the battlefield, limited stock, but exquisite delivery. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit about the arrows themselves. Many archers would actually sign their names on the shaft near the fletching or use a specific branding on the bamboo. This wasn't just for pride. It was for the post-battle accounting we touched on earlier. But it also meant that if you missed and the enemy picked up your arrow, they were literally holding your business card. Imagine the psychological sting of seeing your own name being held up as a trophy by a laughing rival. You treat your arrows with a level of respect bordering on the religious, ensuring they are kept dry and straight. If an arrow gets damp, the feathers wilt, and the message you're trying to send becomes a muffled, wobbly mess. You are a professional communicator, and your stationery must be flawless. You look at the arrows remaining. You have a kabura-ya, a pointed arrow with a wide, wicked blade designed for cutting through the silk cords of armor. You save these for the named opponents, the ones whose lineage you've just finished insulting. Then you have the karamata, the forked arrow, which looks like a crescent moon. These are notoriously difficult to aim, but are terrifying to behold. They are designed to snip horse bridles or cause horrific, wide wounds. When you pull a karamata from your quiver, you aren't just aiming for a kill, you are aiming for a spectacle. You want the enemy to see that strange, silver crescent and feel the specialized nature of your malice. It tells them that you didn't just come to fight, you came prepared for every specific type of ruin. You remember the crocodile dumb logic, the extreme commitment to an edge. In this case, the edge is your arrow management. You've seen archers get quiver panic, where they realize they only have 3 shots left and start to rush their zanchin. You, however, use the low count to deepen your focus. You tell yourself that the fewer arrows you have, the more powerful each one becomes. It's the last bullet in the chamber philosophy, but applied to a 6-foot bow. You look at a particularly ornate arrow with white eagle feathers. This is your closer. You've already decided whose name will be attached to it. The logistics of the quiver turn the chaos of battle into a structured, narrative progression. Interestingly, this limited ammo also forces a specific kind of interaction on the field. Sometimes, if the battle lulls, archers will actually gather spent arrows from the ground, but there is a psychological hierarchy to this. You would never deign to pick up a commoner's arrow. You are looking for status ammunition. If you find a well-crafted arrow from a rival clan, you might fire it back at them, a silent, stinging insult that says, your craftsmanship is better than your aim. It's the ultimate return to sender move. You are playing a game of lethal catch, where the logistics are fueled by the equipment of your enemies. But you have to be careful. The yabira is an open quiver, meaning your arrows are exposed to the elements and the brush. One wrong move through a thicket, and you've lost half your vocabulary to the thorns. You move with a deliberate, feline grace, protecting your back as much as your front. You realize that your quiver is your most vulnerable point. If an enemy archer can hit your quiver, they can shatter your ammunition and leave you voiceless. You've seen it happen. A lucky shot turns a proud samurai into a man with a very expensive, very useless stick. You maintain a defensive posture that keeps your logistics shielded from stray fire. You think about the cost of each shot, not just the gold, but the time. It took a craftsman weeks to harvest that bamboo, cure it, fletch it, and tip it. When you release that string, you are spending weeks of human labor in a fraction of a second. This realization gives your shooting a heavy, somber quality. You aren't just a soldier, you are an executor of a very expensive estate. This weight of investment is something the enemy can feel. They see the quality of your gear and they know that you are backed by a powerful lord and a wealthy province. Your logistics are a visual representation of your clan's power. You reach back and touch the last few arrows. The end of the engagement is near. You need to make these final words count. You look at the field, the smoke, and the fading light. You identify the final target, the one whose death will end the day on your terms. You pull the arrow with the black feathers, the Deathwatch shaft. You notch it with a slow, deliberate motion that says you have all the time in the world. Even though your quiver is nearly empty, the psychological pressure is now entirely on the recipient. They see you reaching for those last, specialized arrows and they know the best is yet to come. You take a deep, diaphragmatic breath, feeling the spirit yell building in your gut. Your logistics are settled, your inventory is low, but your confidence is at its peak. You are ready to deliver the final, most expensive sentence of the day. As you stand on the field, watching the infantry clash below, you are acutely aware of the social chasm between you and the men wielding the katana. In this era, the sword is not yet the soul of the samurai as it will be in centuries to come. Right now, the bow is king, and you are the elite. You look down at the swordsman, the lesser grunt work of the battlefield, and feel a sense of detached superiority. To kill with a sword requires you to get close enough to smell your opponent's breath, to feel the spray of their blood, and to risk a desperate, messy struggle in the mud. But you are a master of distance. Your weapon allows you to strike from the heavens, delivering death while your silk robes remain unsoiled. This is the bow versus the sword hierarchy, and it fundamentally changes how you use your voice. You don't scream out of a need to mask the fear of a close-quarters struggle. You scream because you are a superior being announcing a judgment from afar. Historians still argue whether the shift from the bow to the sword, as the primary symbol of the samurai, was a result of changing tactics, or a deliberate cultural pivot during the peaceful Edo period, to romanticize a more personal form of combat. For you, in the thick of the Kamakura period, there is no such debate. The bow is the weapon of the horse-owning nobility, the men with the time and wealth to train for decades. The sword is your sidearm, a backup for when things have gone catastrophically wrong. When you shout your name, you are reinforcing this class distinction. You are telling the swordsman below that you are the one controlling the flow of the battle, the one who decides who lives and dies before the blades even touch. There's a quirky, fringe tidbit about this rivalry. Some early manuals on etiquette suggested that it was actually considered slightly unrefined for a high-ranking archer to even draw his sword, unless he was literally being pulled off his horse. It was almost a sign of failure. You've seen archers who, having run out of arrows, would rather use their heavy deku as a giant club to beat back attackers than draw their blades. It is a bit like a modern sniper refusing to use a pistol because it feels beneath their specialized training. You treat your sword with respect, but it stays in its scabbard, a silent witness to the dominance of your bow. You feel the psychological power of this distance, because you aren't in the middle of the frantic, sweaty melee. Your voice carries a different kind of authority. It sounds cooler, more calculated. When you call out a target from 60 yards away, it feels like an act of God rather than an act of man. You are using the bow versus the sword dynamic to project an image of untouchable lethality. You look at the swordsmen on the enemy's side. They are looking up at the ridge, eyes darting, trying to find the source of the arrows. They are the prey, and you are the predator in the canopy. Your screams are the only warning they get before the sting of the bamboo. You remember the crocodile dung logic, the commitment to a prestigious, if difficult, advantage. Mastering the bow is your version of that. It takes a lifetime to develop the archer's back and the archer's eye. Whereas any brave fool can swing a sword, this social hierarchy is built into your very posture. You stand taller than the swordsman. Your equipment is more expensive, and your call-out is more elaborate. You are the intellectual of the battlefield. By prioritizing psychological intimidation, you are reminding everyone that war is a game of the mind as much as the body. Interestingly, this hierarchy also dictates your targets. You would never waste a shout or an arrow on a common foot soldier with a sword. That would be like a king arguing with a beggar. You are looking for other archers, your true peers. When two archers engage in a vocal duel, the rest of the battlefield seems to fade away. It's a specialized contest between the elites. You recognize the branding on another archer's bow across the field and realize he is a member of the rival Taira clan. The swordsmen around him are just obstacles. He is the only one who matters. You prepare your voice for a targeted strike against his ego. But there is a vulnerability in this status. If a swordsman manages to close the distance, your bow becomes a liability. It's too long to use in a cramped forest or a narrow hallway. You've seen noble archers slaughtered by common swordsmen because they were too proud to drop the bow and draw the steel. This is the archer's nightmare, the loss of distance. You use your voice to keep that distance. Your screams are meant to stagger a charging swordsman, to make him hesitate for that 1 second you need to notch a final arrow. You are fighting a war of inches and decibels to ensure the sword never gets close enough to speak for itself. You look down at your own sword, the tachi, slung with the edge facing down. It's a beautiful weapon, but it's a secondary character in your story. You feel the rough texture of the bow's grip in your hand and the smooth silk of your sleeves. You are a creature of the air and the wind, Your intimidation is based on the fact that you can see the enemy before they see you, and you can kill them before they can reach you. You are the long-range psychologist, and your bow is your couch. As the sun catches the blade of a nearby ally's sword, you are reminded of the gritty reality of the front line. You don't envy them. You prefer the clean kill of the archer, the one that begins with a name and ends with a whistle. You take a deep breath, filling your lungs with the scent of pine and ozone. You are ready to remind the world why the bow is the primary tool of the heavens. Your voice is primed, your thumb is locked, and the social order of the battlefield is about to be reaffirmed. The enemy swordsman is getting closer, his face twisted in a mask of desperate bravery. He thinks he's found a gap in your line. You don't even look at him with your full attention. You simply let out a sharp, dismissive kiai that sounds like a whip cracking. It's a verbal shoo, a reminder that he is out of his league. You notch your arrow, eyes already moving past him to the next high-status archer. The bow remains supreme, and you are its most vocal advocate.